Hi, Whanua.
Hold up.
Oh, kia ora,
Ka pai.
No, I just want to, that was awesome.
Well, I'd like to now open this meeting of the Regional Strategy and Policy Committee. And firstly, I just want to say that we'll have a couple of other items that added in just briefly. There'll be an acknowledgement from Councillor Penrose in relation to awards that we received yesterday, and also we have the Hibiscus Bay's local board chair here who wishes to also talk about the weed management policy as well. So we'll add that in at the appropriate time. So firstly, we'll ask for any apologies.
Chair, can I just, it's not an apology, but for those that left the phone, there's a phone over here. If you want it back, it'll cost you $50. So it's over here for all those that left it down there.
Thank you.
Oh, it's yours, Dean. Oh, you're on a big wage, so it's 100.
Well, it's $100, yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Philip. Stole it. Lost and found department.
Thank you.
We now have apologies recorded from Councillor Darby for absence on council business, Councillor Cooper, Member Glenn Wilcox for absence, and Councillors Lee, Quacks and Webster for lateness. Any others? I'll move those.
Happy to second, Mr. Chair.
Seconded by Councillor Walker. Put that motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declare that carried. We'll now have the acknowledgement from Councillor Penrose.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair, and I just want to take a couple of minutes, if you don't mind, sir, that to acknowledge our staff last night, and it makes me feel immensely proud when we get continually knocked in the media for a whole raft of reasons and around our regulatory area. You know, our regulatory area in particular, whether it's in a building or resource area, are under pressure and doing immense work. But I also, in this particular case, our bylaw area. I just want to acknowledge our staff, man. They have just gone beyond the call of duty over the last 5.5 years that I've sat around this table and delivered some really great outcomes, not only for the Auckland Council, but the people of Auckland. And last night at the IPANS Award, Public Service Excellence Award in Wellington last night, Auckland Council won the Excellence in Regulatory Systems Award for the bylaws review. That's taken the bylaws down from 158 bylaws down to 32 across the region. And then they went on to win the Supreme Award, which is the Prime Minister Public Service Excellence Award. Awesome. So again, team, outstanding. Kat, if you can pass that on, I'm sure from all of us to our staff right across the organisation. Again, you know, they're just leading at the front end, and can't speak highly of them. So again, just Mr. Chair, thank you for taking the time to acknowledge it today.
Thank you.
Yeah.
My understanding, Mr. Chair, also, whilst the awards went back home to the hotel last night, Paul tucked them into bed beside him last night to make sure they were safe.
Thank you, Councillor.
I'm sure his wife would have been right with that.
And now we'll move to item
Don't sound safe.
item 2, declarations of interest. I don't think there's any been received. Any declarations of interest? No. Item 3 is confirmation of minutes. I move that the minutes of the Regional Strategy and Policy Committee ordinary meeting held on Thursday the 2nd of June 2016, including the confidential section, be received as a true and correct record. Seconded by Councillor Philipina. I'll put that motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Against? Declare that carried. Thank you.
Chair, can I just declare my conflict of interest in item 10
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
around police numbers?
Thank you. We now move to item number 4, petitions, and a petition has been received, which we have here. We've got it here from Georgina Blackmore, and Georgina will be in the public input speaking to us as well. So I move that we receive this petition, which is a petition to the Mayor Len Brown and the Chairman of the Auckland Transport, Dr. Lester Levy, a petition signed by 3,696 people asking to ban the use of carcinogenic chemicals on Auckland roads and parks. Now,
Happy to second.
presented by Georgina Blackmore. move that we receive that petition. It's seconded by Councillor Wayne Walker. I'll put that motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declare that carried. Thank you. We now move to, the next item is to public input, and it's Georgina Blackmore. So we'll have you, the three, Georgina, then Hannah, and then we'll move to Tricia. Thank you. So, Georgina, thank you. It's automatically set to the speaker comes on the minute you start talking. Thank you.
Oh, right. Okay. Thank you.
So you have 5 minutes each.
Oh, yeah, no
thank
worries. I'll go as quick as I can. So I'd like to table an open letter. I will speak to it and I'll read it out for you all as well. My name is Georgina. I represent a group called Spray Free Streets that advocates for a chemical-free city. I'm a second-generation campaigner on this issue. There are people in this room here today who have worked for over 20 years to eliminate chemical sprays in our city, and during that time it has become demonstrably worse. There are more sprays on our streets, parks and playgrounds than ever before, and that is why I'm here. I present to you today an open letter from our group, which you will have received via email this week. It reads, "To all Auckland councillors, local board members, Mayor Len Brown and all prospective council and mayoral candidates standing in the 2016 Auckland Council election. We, the undersigned, demand that Auckland Council and all council-controlled organisations immediately cease the use of the chemical glyphosate for vegetation control purposes in order to protect the health and safety of workers, the general public, the health of other species, the natural environment and future generations. There are significant international concerns about the safety of glyphosate, and under the precautionary principle, Council has a duty to cease its use. Scientific uncertainty is not a reason to continue with a potentially harmful activity until the extent of harm becomes clear. On the contrary, it is the reason to be cautious. We demand that Council fast-track the implementation of the Weed Management Policy 2013 and that full regional funding be reinstated for alternative, healthy and environmentally safe methods of vegetation control, not only to those areas of Auckland that have managed historically without chemical treatments, but to the entire Auckland region, which falls under the Council's remit. We care deeply and therefore need to be informed where our representatives stand on the issue of chemical vegetation control and of their intentions when in office. So additionally, we demand that all current Auckland councillors, local board members, Mayor of Auckland and all prospective council and mayoral candidates standing in the 2016 election respond to this letter, stating their ethical and political positions regarding chemical vegetation control so that this may be a matter of public record. This response should include what steps have been taken to consult with their communities on this matter and what the results of those consultations were, as well as what future consultations they intend to take. We in addition demand that they state which policy they would support or implement if elected to council as a representative of their community. Would they A, immediately implement non-chemical vegetation control, or B, retain current levels of chemical vegetation control, or C, increase the use of chemical vegetation control? If the demands detailed above are not met, we, the undersigned, reserve the right to defend our city, our people and our environment with all non-violent means necessary to stop the use of glyphosate on our streets and parks. So to speak to that, personally I think that on an individual level and on a political level, if something is possible, you should be trying to do it. As soon as you realise that something is having a negative impact, or there's better ways of using our resources or our utilities, as soon as you realise that, you should be moving towards it. They say that wisdom is acting on knowledge. Once you realise that chemicals are unpopular, that they risk our health, that citizens in the city are currently experiencing illness due to their chemical sensitivity, we should be working towards the alternatives. In light of considerable international concern, hundreds of cities, councils and towns around the world have gone spray-free, even whole countries. Right here in New Zealand, Christchurch City Council announced last month that they will be phasing out the use of chemicals in their public places. Hastings, Tauranga, Rotorua and Nelson are all looking at the alternative. In the EU last month, following 3 attempts to relicense glyphosate for 15 years, the EU Parliament failed to get a qualified majority for reapproval. A licence extension was forced through at the last minute by a commission for only 18 months, and they recommended to all EU countries to work towards removing glyphosate from all public spaces. The way that I see it, we are looking at the beginning of the end for glyphosate. It is being dealt blow after blow. Agrochemical companies like Monsanto are restricting its production and are poised to roll out their next generation herbicide, dicamba. We need to be smart, we need to lead, not allow other more dangerous chemicals to fill the vacuum that glyphosate will leave. We need to be investing in clean, healthy alternatives now so that I don't have to watch my children grow up to be 3rd generation campaigners on this issue. I ask you to respond to our letter. I ask that you remember why you got into this game in the first place. You cared enough about people to want to make a difference. You asked us to trust you, that you would represent us, that you would use your power while in office to speak for us. We elect representatives in the knowledge that they care about the same things we do. We have a right to know what you think about this important issue. A democracy should be transparent. I respect that I'm not always going to hear what I like or what I agree with, but the truth of the matter is we have a right to hear what our representatives think. Because at the end of the day, what you believe to be true, what your conscience tells you is right, will drive your decision making and how you exercise your power that we have given you when it comes to a vote. So I look forward to receiving your responses on this soon. In addition, I would like to, can I move? I'd like to move to that we need an online spray-free register where people can register their parks, their community gardens, their schools, their homes, so that it's easy for people to go spray-free.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Councillor Watson?
So thank you very much, Georgina. You've delivered a petition here today. My question is, what do you think that the petitioners, who I assume are a combination of people who fought this battle 20 years ago, you mentioned at the start you're second generation, whereby people in the North Shore, Auckland City, actually fought and won this over 2 decades ago, and I'm assuming new people with a concern that keep up to date with the literature and the developments overseas that you mentioned in Europe and in our own country like Christchurch. What do you think the petitioner's view is of the Auckland Council then that is going in the exact opposite direction of previous legacy councils and international trends, i.e. it is spraying more chemicals, not less? What do you think the view of that combination of petitioners and our Auckland City is?
That's a fairly wide-ranging, so if you could just...
It covers exactly what was in the petition.
I guess I can only speak to anecdotal conversations I've had with people who have been historically in this battle for a long time, and new people who I speak to who don't necessarily know about it yet. When I explain or give them the weed management policy 2013, which specifically says to minimise the use of agrochemicals for the health of the people in Auckland, and then explain to them that the council is advocating for a blanket use of chemicals all over Auckland, it just doesn't fit very well with people. It makes them think when something is so positive and there is negative effects from something, it makes us very, very, very uneasy, because it makes us think who's running this show, who benefits from not following this policy. And that comes down to transparent government and who is running the show. People start to question that, and faith in the Auckland Council and the super city at large, it does get called into question.
Thank you. Councillor Walker, do you have a question?
Sure. I just have a question, and it's a question of Georgina, but Mr. Kimpton may be able to assist.
No, only of Georgina, please.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, I can ask the question.
Yeah.
So, you're asking for an online spray-free register, and I'm mindful that I can register my car online, so it'd be obviously nice to have that so it's easier. And I understand that that's been on the books for a few years now. Do you have any idea of how close that online register is to being implemented?
I believe that there is the spray-free register, which you have to go through very many levels of...
It's clumsy.
It's clumsy for people, and I think that, as you say, if you can register your car online, you could register your house online. I think that we have the technology now. I'll happily set that up for you if
Sure.
you want me to.
So I'm just curious, and I know Mr. Kimpton may not want to answer, but we do have some public interest in making sure that we're efficient and effective. We won those awards last
Councillor
night.
Walker, stop, please. It's not a time for debate.
I'm not debating, I'm simply putting something on the table.
It's time to ask questions, and you've asked a question, you've got the answer.
Well, no, I didn't get the answer.
You
but
did get the answer, thank you. I'll now, no other questions. I'll move that we receive the letter
Happy to
from
second.
Georgina, and thank you, Georgina, for your presentation. So we'll move that, and Councillor Walker will second it. I'll put that motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declare that carried. Thank you very much, Georgina.
Thanks. I look forward to receiving your responses.
Thank you. And now we have Hannah Blackmore. If you come up to the table, please, Hannah. I should have said to start with that, I think you're aware of it, that it is being recorded on video, but I think you're aware of that. Thank you.
That's fine. And I'm not going to speak to all of that.
No. You've got to have the evidence with you for the questions. Thank you.
Yes.
Can you just move the speaker just around towards you a little bit? That's it. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for allowing us to come and speak to you today. And it is a matter of huge concern that from the public's point of view, we have been cut out of any kind of public input process submissions for quite a number of years. But it's now getting to be critical. And I am conscious that I will perhaps need your help and assistance to try and get some kind of progress on implementing the visions and objectives of the weed management policy. But what's happening is that this policy has been basically emasculated, and we are extremely concerned that the only item that seems to be being implemented is that the changes in policy have to be cost effective. Now, some of you were here in the previous term when this went through a lengthy public submission process, and the huge amount of input from councillors, from local boards, from members of the public, from experts was huge. But since that's been passed, it's disappeared out of sight, and it no longer comes before any committee for any kind of consideration. Now, because in the wisdom when the super city was set up, Auckland Transport took over the vegetation control part of the policy. And I have to say to you that it was the vegetation control on the roads and the pavements which provoked the huge response from the public back in the 80s and the 90s to actually change this policy. They wanted to get it off the streets, they wanted to get it off the park, and that's what they looked to. And it was a health that drove the issue. So when Auckland Transport took the vegetation control, I'm hugely concerned that in doing that, the prices, the costs of doing the vegetation control have skyrocketed. It's as if when we had vegetation control where a vegetation control contractor contracted directly to a city like North Shore, they only between a contractor and the council. There was no middleman. Now we have got this huge process where we have got council, our rates pay for council to give money to Auckland Transport. Auckland Transport have contracted to supercontractors. The supercontractors have hired subcontractors to do the vegetation control, and in some cases, subcontractors, all taking their things. Now, I would like you to just look at this cost variation that's come up. And this is some research I'm doing and I'm ongoing, and I would like to actually, the data's been extracted from this ongoing report that I'm doing, and I would like to have that tabled so that councillors can in fact go through and see what I'm talking about. But if you have a look, these are the percentage of the cost of alternative over glyphosate. And you can go back to 91 and you can see what's happened. And it's all within single figures or double figures. And then suddenly, in 2012, we have this huge leap. Suddenly we are told that the cost of doing alternative to chemical is 780% more expensive. Now, the documents that confirmed that, the ones down below it, the 680 and so on, were not released to us until August last year. So we were never able to verify it. So we have been battling since then. Now, the prices have come down a little bit, but you can see that generally, and these are all prices, these are all costs that Auckland Transport has supplied to the weed management project implementation. And I am hugely concerned. I can say to myself, just looking at this, what have we got here? We've got the fact that suddenly, from contracts that are actually in operation, which are only, 50%, 40%, 18% more expensive, suddenly, Auckland so what's happened? And how do we get access to this? How do we understand what's going on? I genuinely think that if there was a possibility that Auckland Council takes back the vegetation control, extracts it from Auckland Transport, it seems bizarre to me that we have expert vegetation control and weed control officers within parks. They've done superb work for years. They've got huge experience. And yet they're cut out of the main part, which is the vegetation control. I mean, I hope this works. Now, that was the first letter I got in 2012 from Murray Noon, who sent Mike Isle out to us to say, this is how much it costs. And we could never, ever verify this. In the end, we went to the Ombudsman. And that's how we ended up getting the OIA. Now, this still persisted. In July 2013, this was a graph that was put into the first operational review, which came before council. And if you have a look at that, I mean, it's statistically, it's I can't think of the right word, but it's misleading. And if you did that at university or even at school, it's got no access, it's got no things. So, but if you look at that, anybody, a council, anybody says, oh, we cannot possibly afford alternatives. Look, it's 900% more expensive. But this is not true. But the thing said is that these prices have been supplied from Auckland Transport. We cannot verify this, and it's gone on right up until what we have here. Now, those last two items are from a review that was finalised in December. This has not gone to any council committee. It's not gone to your political advisory group. It's not gone to the reference group. It's a review, an operational review. I don't know why they did another operational review, having done one in 2013, but they did another one. And now those last two figures, well, you will have to read the main document to understand it.
Thank you.
So really, what I'm looking to you is that there has to be some way in which this sort of information, we're not, the only information I've had, Councillor Wood, has been from OIA. Now, it shouldn't be that the public has to do this. If you don't know what you're asking for, you won't get it. It shouldn't be that we have to spend all this time getting officers to search for this material. It should be available, and it should be going to committees for us to have a look at. It should be going to the local boards. The local boards are asking for help and assistance, and instead what's happening is that being told, sorry, you cannot have a change, it is too expensive. But this is what Auckland Transport is going to be implementing, not council. So, as I say, I'm asking for help and assistance here into some way we can get democracy back on board and these things can be properly monitored.
Thank you. Well, we'll certainly get Mr. Kimpton to get his staff to reply to the issues that you've raised here today, and the issues that Georgina have raised in her letter. We'll certainly look at those.
Could I just point out actually that
we've run out of time.
Yes, I did raise these in January in a report, and I specifically replied to Dean Kimpton's response to that. And Mr. Kimpton did say that he was going to be getting back to you on all of these issues. And to the best of our knowledge, this has not happened. So
Okay,
this
well,
is
we'll-
going back to
certainly,
January.
We'll certainly, Mr Kimpton assures me that he will reply to the issues that have been raised by you here this morning. Thank you.
Thank
Now
you,
there's some questions. Councillor Watson and then Councillor Lee.
Thank you very much, Hannah. I just want to confirm that those figures that that you have presented to us today have been received from information compiled by Auckland Transport and official information requests. Is that correct?
Yes, all the ones from 2012 onwards, yes, that's correct.
Okay, so I'd just ask your comment then on the startling revelation that the increases in the comparison between chemical and non-chemical when Auckland Transport took over was over 700% in 1 year, 2012. I'm assuming that cost then, in terms of your analysis of the figures, essentially takes away any of the so-called savings that councillors have been basing long-term plan decisions on in terms of what is a preferable form of weed control throughout Auckland. Obviously, if it's a 700% increase on the previous figure.
Debating. Have you got
Not debating, I'm asking a question about figures. You keep interrupting.
No, you...
No, why don't I let the person who's presented answer the question that I've just asked without you interrupting?
Okay, well...
Point of order, please. Mr Chairman. It is an emotional issue, but can you please rule on the importance of respect and the authority of the chair? I just do not understand how you can attack the chair like this.
Not interested in the figures,
Please,
Mr Mayor, are
I've
you?
got the floor.
Order.
Yeah.
So, Mr Chairman, to
Yes.
enable you to chair
Not
with
so
some
concerned
courtesy,
about the figures.
will you please
Yeah.
reiterate the need to respect the chair's ruling and then ask the submitter to reply to the question?
Maybe you respect people who are suffering from
Order,
chemical
order,
spray, Mr Mayor.
Order,
Yeah.
Councillor Watson. You've asked the question, and I take what the Mayor says is a serious issue that that we should act with decorum when we are. And I think and questions should be succinct and to the point. So you've asked the question. I see.
I appreciate that, Mr Chair. I just wish he'd show a little bit more concern for people that are affected by spray.
Order,
he is with
order,
points of order.
Councillor Watson, I don't think that is really becoming of a councillor to talk
Well,
like that to the Mayor.
I think it's true. It might not be
Anyway,
becoming, but I think it's true.
Order. Councillor, sorry, Anna, can you just see if you can answer?
It's not actually just these huge, great sums that were initially quoted, because eventually, when we got the information that we were asking for, it turned out that, oh well, this had been calculated from first assumptions. It was a crazy way of looking at the figures. So it came down to about 2 to 3%, 2 to 3 percent more expensive. No, sorry, 200 to 300% more expensive. But my huge concern is that at no time in pursuing and looking at all of these figures which I have gathered in, a huge amount of research has gone into this. I am appalled that there never seems to be an instance where apples are compared with apples. I mean, even as you saw just on that simple table, the figures varied hugely from, 200% to 111%. It goes up and down depending on what is being looked at. And there is absolutely no clarity around that. It's as if, supposing Hibiscus Bays asked contractors to give them a quote for doing all of their roads, and the contractors came in and they one quoted for glyphosate, one quoted for fatty acid, and another one quoted for hot water or steam. Then they could get the tenders in and they could compare it, because you'd be comparing apples with apples. But at the moment, what's happening is you're getting a comparison, say, of steam in a high service area with glyphosate in rural Franklin. You cannot compare those sort of figures. So there is, as I say, there is no clarity, there is no transparency around what is being put through.
Thank you.
Thank you, George.
Councillor Lee, you've got a question?
Thank you very much, and thank you very much, Hannah, and thank you for the work that you are doing. it appears to me that on your rather long and lonely quest in regard to glyphosate, that you are finding other things that are seriously amiss in the system, and information in
Councillor Lee,
general. Can
you just ask...
Listen, if you don't want to have the mayor coming in acting as a prefect and over a row, please don't interrupt me.
Well, ask the question. You're asking questions.
I have to tell you that I have serious problems with figures given to me as a director of Auckland Transport when it comes to simple things like the cost of building rail. So when Kiwi Rail built the only Hunga branch line, it was 2.9 million. Now Auckland Transport says 165 million per kilometre. So are you suggesting that the problem with information is bigger than just information about chemicals?
Yes, indeed.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Lee, I asked you just to ask a question, and you made quite a dissertation, which was just...
Well, it's about sharing information, exchanging information.
It's question time. I think that's...
This is about democracy, Mr Chairman. You're acting in a restrictive way and holding up the meeting and doing it.
Councillor Walker, you got a question?
Sure, I've got a question, and it's against a background of probably an absence of public confidence in this council on this issue, and a lack of openness and transparency, and often a circumstance where questions and issues can't be raised because they get shut down. So that's the context of my question. And it goes down, my question goes to the figures that you're raising, which go to costs. And around public confidence, because I understand that some of these figures have come from sources that are before the courts for fraud. That's one thing. I'd like your confirmation around that.
Oh, come on.
Councillor Walker...
This is a question that I'm asking. It's a simple question.
Well, ask the question simply, or I'll rule that you're not to ask the question. So make your decision up. Make a decision now.
So I'm asking for some confirmation on that point.
Oh, she wouldn't.
Is that the case?
It's not the point.
Well, I think that's a stupid question, because you know that the matter would be sub judice.
Well, it goes to public. It goes to public confidence. It goes to openness and transparency, and the difficulty that the community have for getting good information. It's also true to say, and I'd seek your confirmation, that there are very large sums of money involved in these contracts, that there are very large companies involved that have a vested interest in using toxic chemicals, irrespective of whether it's good for people's health or not.
Councillor Walker, you are actually just making a statement here. You're not asking a question. Can you please either ask a question or don't...
So how much money are we talking about with these contracts? Hannah, do you have any idea?
Well, when you, and again, I would be very grateful if this document, the full explanation document, is tabled, because within there you will see that when we got these sort of figures from Auckland Transport, I personally went and spoke to contractors and asked them what their price was. And I have extrapolated their replies into this document. So we have instances where, using the same methodology that Auckland Transport has used, we have, for instance, a situation where hot water is cheaper than glyphosate in some circumstances.
Thank you.
So yes, the whole question, and the original one that Councillor Walker asked, is that a lot of the problems do seem to be within the North Shore and Rodney area, which has been the subject of a serious fraud investigation. And yes, some of the original Auckland Transport officers who denied me information are those officers who are now being prosecuted.
Thank you for the answer to my question.
Well, I think you knew the question. You knew the answer all the time, Councillor Walker, but it doesn't matter. Councillor Fletcher, you've got a question.
Thank you. Thank you, Hannah. I just want to be quite clear. What you were saying is that you would prefer that this come back to the council from Auckland Transport.
It seems to me to be logical. We've split the operation, and my huge concerns obviously are around cost, because what's happening is that by splitting the operation and having all of these middlemen operating, that there is a huge increase in the price. So if ratepayers want to save money, then I think that the first thing is it should come back. And secondly, the operation doesn't have a finish, it's not at a boundary. And I think that the vegetation control experts are able to operate across the boundaries. So for instance, where you've got a park edging at the moment, do we stop here? And Auckland Transport starts there. And I think to bring it back in to city parks, I think would obviously be a huge cost savings. And then the savings that we make, we can then go to the alternatives. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. With that, I'll move that we thank Hannah
Happy to
Blackmore
second.
for her presentation this morning, and seconded by Councillor Fletcher. I'll put that motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declare that carried. Thank you, Hannah. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors.
And the next submitter is Tricia Cheel from the Friends of Sherwood. Thank you, Tricia.
Point of order, Mr Chairman.
Yes.
Point of order. Mr Chairman, I know that there's a huge amount of passion, and we've seen that demonstrated around the chamber so far already, and certainly there's a great deal of passion on the part of the submitters. But Mr Chairman, I think it's reasonable for you to enforce council standing orders which give 5 minutes to each presenter. That's standing orders, Mr Chairman, and I would expect that you would, as an experienced councillor and a former mayor, that you would enforce those standing orders.
Well, Councillor Quacks, thank you for your suggestion. As the mayor has
suggestion,
said,
Mr Chairman.
Well, no, I know what standing orders say,
Good.
but we don't, we're not rigid in the way that they are adhered to on many occasions, and I think, as the mayor said, this is a very emotive issue. These people have come here this morning prepared to give their presentation. The presentations were actually just over the 5 minute mark, because the
There were
clerk
9 minutes, Mr Chairman, I timed them.
well, the clerk is timing them as well, and I think that from that point it was okay. I think the fact that questions are put to the submitters which are not just questions, but they have a substantial preamble is the problem. And I asked councillors in the next with this submitter not to just ask a question, and that
It's
will,
not the
will help.
questions, Mr Chairman, that are subject to standing orders.
Okay.
It is the presentation.
Thank
And if
you.
you want to be the Wayne Barnes of the Auckland Council, well, that's fine, but you need to enforce standing orders, Mr Chairman. It's not quite simple.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Quacks. Show Ms. Cheel, thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'm the coordinator for Friends of Sherwood, and sadly, just last month, we farewelled our chairperson of the last 26 years, and it was merciful that for the past couple of years, he hasn't been mobile enough to see the terrible neglect that our plantings have suffered since being handed back to council, considering all the time and effort that he put into them. We're still waiting for reassurance that there will be no further toxic chemicals being used in the Sherwood Basin or the Taiatea catchment, so it is safe for our volunteers to try to rescue as much as we can of this over $500,000 project. And it's disappointing to see such community effort being tossed aside so cavalierly by this council, and the saga of the weed management policy is yet another example. Although the Auckland Council weed management policy is mainly based on the Auckland City Council one, we concur with the sentiment that the use of agri-chemicals be minimised. North Shore City Council policy was more satisfactory by promoting the use of non-toxic methods wherever possible, and the work of Friends of Sherwood right from the very first totally biased Devonport weed trial have shown beyond a shadow of a doubt that they can compete favourably with the cost of glyphosate if all the costs are accounted for, such as the health care for the victims. Furthermore, with the community involvement that our integrated organic management models promote, the results are far superior. You received the information last year that the World Health Organisation declared glyphosate to be a probable human carcinogen back in March. Auckland Transport Parks, and indeed Council as a whole, ignored the warning and not only increased the use of this genotoxic endocrine disruptor, but also cut funding for non-toxic weed control in the long-term plan. A mere $1.5 million, I believe, that protected the community against much larger personal health expenditure. In effect, this means that most of the real cost is transferred to the victims. Just last year, a momentous event was largely ignored by the media, but the 100,000th chemical was registered in June 2015. These are substances that haven't existed on Earth before, and the effects of which are largely unknown, since testing is mostly done by the manufacturers. And it's a bit like having the burglars in charge of the crown jewels, and never any consideration of the synergistic, accumulative or compound effects which have been shown to be considerable, such as the influence of fluoride and the uptake of lead, which again, I wish John Tamahiri was here today, has been shown to affect African Americans and Hispanics far more than Caucasians, for instance. If we truly to have the most livable city, then it's only common sense to make sure that it is as free as possible of toxic chemicals, waste and other pollution, as Friends of Sherwood keep asking for. Why use toxic chemicals or poisons or degrading, polluting practices where there are better ways to achieve a goal that don't put everyone at risk? On Friday, the 1st of July, that's just last Friday, a collaboration of scientists, health professionals and children's and environmental advocates released a scientific consensus statement called Project Tender as a national call to action to significantly reduce exposure to chemicals and pollutants that are contributing to neurodevelopment disorders in children because of concern over the now substantial scientific evidence linking toxic environmental chemicals to these disorders. People's exposure to these chemicals are widespread and begin in utero, and infants and children are especially at risk. The majority of chemicals are untested for these effects, and the ones that they list are just the tip of the iceberg. Only a minority of chemicals have been evaluated for neurotoxic effects in adults, and even fewer have been evaluated for potential effects on brain development in children. Further toxicological studies and regulatory evaluations seldom address combined effects of chemical mixtures, despite evidence that all people are exposed to dozens of chemicals at any given time. And I have that report here I'd like to table for the information of the members. So they say our system for evaluating scientific evidence and making decisions about environmental chemicals is broken. We cannot continue to gamble with our children's health. Friends of Sherwood would like to point out that although there's a good start, this does only address the tip of the iceberg, and we suspect that there is a restraint through this project tender to not upset powerful lobby groups such as the chemical manufacturers too much. So we can do better than that surely here in Auckland. Note that the organophosphates that they talk about include malathion, which is classified by the World Health Organization as a probable human carcinogen in category 2A, along with diazinon and the glyphosate. So we're talking about similar toxic chemicals, as described by the IARC manuscript of the World Health Organization, and I believe you got a copy of that last year, but I've got another one here for those who may have missed out.
Thank you. I think that you're up to the 5 minutes now.
Well, I've just...
I will have to ask you to wrap up now then.
Okay. So we're looking at a tsunami of obesity, diabetes, dementia, etc., and how much can be attributed to this chemical warfare is not yet totally determined. So we're asking maybe the chair of Auckland Transport could go to the District Health Board that he also chairs to start to evaluate just how much his love of chemicals is costing that budget. This project observes the economic costs associated with the neurodevelopmental disorders are staggering. It costs twice as much to educate the child.
Thank you. I think we'll have to finish now.
But I'd just like, as I say, I'd like
over
this,
the 5 minutes.
I've got this last...
No,
I move an extension of time, Mr Chairman.
Any questions?
I second that.
This is an important health and safety question, and a question of community well-being and trust in the system.
Okay, I'll put that then. There's been a motion put on the floor that we extend the time of the submitter.
By how much?
Well, she's finished.
You have to
One
nominate a time.
minute. Come on.
Who's chairing the meeting now?
I'm
By-
proposing
by-
1 minute.
Point of order. What about
Hey,
respect for the
it's
chair?
Councillor Lee, do you wish to put a time on how...
3 minutes?
Madam, how long do you need?
1 minute would be
One-
fine. I've got
1
about
minute
that
will do.
much left. That's
Minute-
Oh, 1
a minute is fine.
It's a motion on
Aye.
the floor.
Second that.
Aye.
Is that?
I'll second that. You happy with a minute?
Aye.
1 minute. I'll put that motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Against?
Thank you very
Okay, you've
much.
got 1 minute. We'll have time.
It's the most important part of it really is that a 2009 analysis in the United States found that for every $1 spent to reduce exposures to lead, and we're talking about a range of chemicals here that includes glyphosate, a potent neurotoxin, society would benefit by $17 to $221. No doubt the cost-benefit ratio of reducing exposure to glyphosate and other toxic chemicals would be broadly in the same region. So you have the opportunity today to make a start on the reduction in the prevalence of those hazards in our city by enacting your own weed management policy and restoring the budget for non-toxic weed control as required by the policy. So spend no more of my rate money on these poisons, please. No rates for Roundup or fluoride or 1080 or cholecalciferol or brodifacoum or even plastic bags for that matter. So that's the main point I came along to say is the health costs are never accounted for and they are staggering and they are being loaded onto the victims and it's got to stop.
Thank you.
Thanks.
You got a question, Councillor Wayne Walker?
Sure. I have a question about the issue that you raise around the health costs. We know that the ratepayer cost for spraying is maybe $1, $2 a year per ratepayer per year. In terms of health costs, what sort of cost examples could you give us that people in the community are facing as a consequence of this issue?
Well, I mean, I've got the own example of my poor little dog, the $400 on a drip just on one occasion. I've got another case of a person who lives opposite the East Coast Bay Service Centre there. Every time they spray the village green there, it took him years and years to find out exactly what was wrong with him, but he ends up having to go to Matizade every time to be detoxed, and that is very expensive. That's a couple of $100 a pop. Now, if you multiply that by the hundreds and thousands of people all over the city, many who don't understand or even realise that they've actually been affected by it, and then, of course, you've got the ongoing costs. I mean, if you look at it, how our body copes...
Thank you. I think you've answered the question there. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Tricia.
Are there any other questions? I'll move that we receive the documentation from Ms. Cheel and thank her for her presentation, seconded by Councillor Casey. Put that motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tricia.
Can I take those?
We now move to local board input. And the chair of the Hibiscus and Bays local board and Janet Fitzgerald is here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Janet Fitzgerald is here in her capacity of the chair of our Parks Committee, and thank you very much for accommodating our request to speak. We had actually organised a time slot on Councillor Walker's Environment, Climate Change and Natural Heritage Committee, and we're rather disappointed that that particular committee didn't go ahead because we wanted the opportunity to present that before the actual annual plan meeting that you held, which of course is past tense now. We're not going to be talking about transport today because that's not an area that we have any control over, but just to say Council does have control over that area because Councillor Webster's Finance and Performance Committee of course provides supply. So I think that that's possibly an area where you can address the issue that have been raised by some of the submitters today. Just to talk about it though, we were rather disappointed, in fact considerably disappointed as a local board when the decision was made at the last LTP plan time to actually lower the service standards. And so for our local board, we don't believe that we were properly consulted. We were told after the event that exactly what that reduction in budget meant. And for us, it meant changes in service standards with gardens, but also a change and a shift from mechanical edging to chemical spraying. And it's an issue that's caused a lot of concern in our particular area. We had, in your last annual plan submission process, over 200 submissions came from our local board area. We have had numerous requests from people living beside our parks to actually have mechanical edging reintroduced. the dollar sum that we were told to reinstate our service standards, which was just over $159,000, was well beyond our local board's parks budget, and we felt really concerned about that. We have tried to think laterally. We have talked to our community. We have looked at a policy that Kaipātiki Local Board has been pushing, which is to adopt a park, and we have spoken to some of the people who have shown concern about perhaps they're going into the parks to actually do the mechanical edging themselves. With the new health and safety legislation, that has opened up a total can of worms. You know, talking to the contractor, we have discussed with Grant Muir the possibility of their coming under the contractor's umbrella. It's not a really easy process. We believe that we should be allowed, as this new contract's coming into existence shortly, more flexibility as a local board. We've actually talked to a couple of our providers, in particular the Bays Youth Community Trust, about the possibility of a program where their NEET students could actually do the actual edging. And we would like to have that flexibility. Mr. Chairman, you know that when we were both on the North Shore City Council, and it wasn't actually a hard-fought battle, it was something that a great majority of council supported the idea of going away from chemicals. Not being chemically sensitive myself, I know a lot of people who are, and we actually felt that that was a higher service standard to achieve. And it's very interesting that Christchurch City Council is looking at moving in that direction. So we're here today to say, on behalf of the local boards, we were really concerned that when there was a drop in service standards, that we went to the lowest common denominator, which I was just talking to the chair of Manurewa. I was told, actually I believed that there was a consistent service standard through the Manukau City Council, but seemingly the actual lowest service standard was in Manurewa, and that was adopted across the whole region without, I don't believe, proper consultation with the communities about exactly what that lowering of 4 million actually meant. So I just implore, I'm not demanding, because I just don't believe that demanding actually works. We're requesting.
Okay,
We believe that local boards, Mr. Chairman, should have more flexibility when it comes to the contracting, and with a growth area like ours, it's really important that we can offer a standard of service that our communities actually want.
Thank you. Any questions, Councillor Watson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll try and make it as succinct as possible. The differential in budget that was saved with going to mechanical edging across all of Auckland's local boards was $950,000 on the basis of the figures supplied. That works out as an average of $45,000 per local board on average. What's your view in terms of priority and service levels over the sums of money that are involved in going to chemicals as opposed to mechanical edging?
Well, that figure, and whether you can actually divide it by the number of boards, because ours covers a fairly extensive geographical area, really doesn't actually relate for us, because we were told for just the mechanical edging to be reintroduced was going to be 110,000. So there seems to be quite a deficit there in the figure that we were asked for compared to what you're suggesting,
Mine's a cumulative figure, and your one is 125,000 on the basis of the figures provided.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Cashmore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hi, Julie. So what we're looking here is a level of service over and beyond what is the regional level of service for your local board. You're advocating for that. So would your community be prepared, and would your board be willing to accept a targeted rate to provide that?
No, we aren't, because we looked at our baseline, our baseline provided that level of service. And then council made a decision to introduce the lowest possible baseline across the Auckland region. And we actually felt that that was unreasonable. In terms of rating, particularly our Bays local board area, in many areas, including my own property, we've seen rises around 30%. What concerns people more than anything else about the Auckland Council is actually the drop in service standards. People are prepared to accept the additional rates, they don't like it, but the service standards really concern them. And for such a small amount of money, $4 million.
You've answered the question, thank you. Councillor Walker, Wayne Walker, do you have a question?
Sure. Just in terms of the drop in service level, and assuming you're referring to the ugly scorched earth that we now have around the parks and the like, what sort of feedback have you had from people around that in terms of the aesthetics and so on? Do people like it?
People don't like the aesthetic look. Some people don't like the use of chemicals. But people were happy and satisfied with their previous service level.
Thank you. No other questions? I'll move that we thank the Chair and,
Happy to second.
And the member from the Hibiscus Bay Local Board for the presentation, seconded by Councillor Wayne Walker. I'll put that motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declare that carried. Now the Mayor has asked for an input.
Yeah, Mr Chair, just a very brief comment, councillors, to acknowledge the submitters here today, and you'll recall they came through to the annual plan round and had quite a bit to say there. I assured them that this was the appropriate committee to come into. And the second thing that I gave them was my view that as the leader of the city, we've had a policy in place for 3 years, and it was robust, but it's timely to reflect on that policy. So, councillors, I will work with the Chair in bringing through a review on the various parts and the application of that policy, and particularly reflecting on what Julia's had to say from a local board view. Some councillors have in particular highlighted one or two issues where we'll be looking for Dean and the Chief Executive Officer of Auckland Transport to respond, to give comfort or otherwise. This is not a matter that we will sit on our hands on. There's no reason why we shouldn't start straight in on this process to get one, clarity, and then secondly, just to review the way we go forward. I think it would be helpful. And look, most of the amalgamation of bylaws and policies has been effective, but one or two are going to take a little bit longer to tease out. So I would suggest to you that we would try to get something back in the next month. Councillor Wayne and Councillor John have been particularly focused on this issue. Very happy to work with them in shaping up the way forward.
Through you, Mr Chair.
Yes, Councillor.
I just seek some clarification, because my understanding is that the community at large doesn't have any issue with policy. We have a policy. It was well consulted on. It's actually the implementation that's the issue, what we're doing,
Yep.
not the policy.
Yeah.
It's the implementation that is the issue, and the massive increase in spraying that we have now under a policy that seeks to minimise it.
Councillor Walker, can you desist from making a major speech?
I'm just emphasising that it's implementation that is the issue, not policy.
You started off to ask a question, and then you launched into a speech which seemed to become a tirade at the end, and I don't think that's helpful. I will ask Mr. Kimpton.
It's not a tirade.
I will ask Mr. Kimpton to just advise what he intends to do from here, notwithstanding the fact that you are on the Weed Management Advisory Group, so you know exactly what's going on, Councillor Walker. But Mr.
Well, I don't know exactly what's going on, Mr Chair.
Well,
So I can confirm that we have both a political advisory group responsible for weed management, and that's a collection of councillors around this table and local board chairs. And I can confirm we have a best practice technical reference group which looks at best practice when it comes to weed management. It considers all forms of weed management appropriate to the type of weed. But in terms of the specific review that's been proposed, it has been agreed both at that group and it's proposed by the Mayor that we review the weed management policy. It is our objective to scope that review and bring it back by the end of August and bring a recommendation to this committee for the September meeting. So that's the process that's been proposed by the Mayor and accepted, and well, it's been adopted in terms of staff providing the implementation means for that.
Thank you. No, Councillor Walker, there is no further discussion on this
Well, there was some
matter.
misleading information there,
that-
Mr Chair.
Order. The officer has given the information, and that's
It was
the
misleading.
That is the final say on this issue. Thank you. We'll now move to item 7, extraordinary business, and there is one item of extraordinary business that has been brought to our attention, and Mr Kimpton can talk to that at this stage. Yeah,
Certainly. So there's been one item that Councillor Casey would like to talk to, and the question is whether we do that now.
Yes, and I think in the circumstances, I think I'd prefer to bring it at the end of the meeting, seeing we've taken so long to get through to this stage. So we'll bring that up at the end of the meeting. I'll move, it's been brought to my attention that it's a minor matter that Councillor Casey has raised. You can advance it now, and we'll move a motion, Councillor Casey, as the nature of the item, and then you can bring it forward at the end of the meeting.
It's basically about staff bullying and abuse and the recent issue around the pup that was found in the dustbin in Grey Lynn.
So you'll move that a minor item under standing orders be brought up at the appropriate time in this meeting. You're moving that. Is there a seconder?
Happy to second.
Seconded by
Mr Chairman, point of order. An extraordinary item of business, there must be a reason why the discussion cannot be held or delayed until a subsequent meeting because it's not on the agenda. Maybe we could have an explanation from Mr Kempton or the mover of why this matter cannot be raised at another meeting.
It's not an extraordinary item, it's a matter of minor significance, which is another standing order.
No, it is a extraordinary item, but under the minor matter status, which is set out in the...
So possibly, if I can just read out 2.4.6, discussion of minor matters. The meeting may discuss an item that is not on the agenda if it is a minor matter relating to the general business of council and the chairperson explains at the beginning of the public part of the meeting that the item will be discussed.
So I've decided it can be discussed at the appropriate
Just
time.
clarification, Mr Chairman.
Thank you. So I'll move, it's been moved and seconded. I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Against? Declare that carried. We'll bring it up at the appropriate time. Thank you. We now move to item 9, which is a submission from local government on the submission on the Local Government Act 2000 Amendment Bill number 2, and we have Wayne here this morning to introduce this item. Wayne Brown, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair and members. This item seeks delegations for the preparation of a submission to the Local Government Act Amendment Bill number 2. The issue is that the closing date for submissions doesn't sit well with our cycle of meetings. The submission date is to close on the 27th of July. We have sought an extension from Select Committee Secretariat. The latest advice from a phone call this morning was that it has not yet been considered. It may be considered at a meeting today. So in the first instance, we're asking that delegations be provided to the Chair and Deputy Chair to sign off on the submission for the 28th of July if an extension is not granted. The other thing that we're asking for is a political working party to work with staff on the development of that submission. Unfortunately, we're working in a very, very compressed time frame, and you'll be aware that there is a workshop on the bill this afternoon.
Happy to move, Mr. Chair.
Yes, move. Second, sorry. Yeah, you'll specify that the members, where's the list? Yeah, the chair, deputy chair, which is councillor and I, a member of the Independent Maori Statutory Board, and one or two other members who may be agreed by the committee if the committee wishes to add those members. If any members here are interested in being part of this group, anyone's around the room? Councillor Webster?
Yep.
And Councillor Wayne Walker, you interested? Thank you. So we'll add those names in as well. And then you got the names in there, so we'll now, we can now in a position to move that. Those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declare that carried. And we'll have a workshop, hopefully a reasonably brief workshop at the conclusion of this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Wayne. We now move to item 10, which is a position for this council on Local Government New Zealand remit to advocate for increased funding of community policing and policing levels. And this was raised, I think, by Councillor Webster briefly at the last meeting, as she is our representative on Zone 1, and it was raised at the Zone 1 meeting in Whangarei a few weeks ago. So I'll let the officers introduce the paper and talk to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the report seeks agreement for Auckland Council to vote in support of the remit for Local Government New Zealand to advocate for increased police funding, particularly into community policing. The report presents what we believe to be fairly solid evidence in support of that remit, in particular noting that of the approximately $300 million in the recent budget announcement for increased policing funding, none of that went to increasing frontline staff members. The report also notes that population is one of the key drivers when it comes to deployment of police, and certainly given the exponential population growth we're seeing in Auckland, we think there would be a strong case to be made for increased frontline staff within Auckland. And the report also notes in particular that resolution rates in Auckland have been consistently lower than the national average over the last 20 years. We also know that 18 other local governments are proposing to vote in support of that remit. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
I'm
Thank
happy
you,
to
Paul
move.
and Katarina, for being here.
I'm happy to move.
Councillor Webster would move. Is there a seconder?
Yeah, I'll second.
Seconded by Councillor Penrose. I think it's pretty straightforward. I think the Deputy Mayor would be the person who would represent us, and I think there's an opportunity for local Government New Zealand for us to second the remit if the representatives, our representatives at the conference will agree to that and also speak to it. So Councillor Lee, thank you.
Yes, I support this, Mr. Chairman, and the need for patrolling has certainly been reinforced in my mind after a spate of petty crime in the city centre, at which the presence of police would have been very helpful. But I just wonder whether it's a case of throwing more money at it, or is there indeed a preference or a policy within the bureaucracy of the police which tends to be opposed to sending people out on walking patrols, walking the beat? I think there needs to be a policy change also within the police based on the fact that the public receives great assurance and security just seeing police walking around. And I don't think that is really understood within the hierarchy of the New Zealand Police Force. And I've actually had cause to express those concerns directly to them at a public meeting regarding the vicious assaults on Chinese students in Albert Park earlier in March.
Thank you. Councillor Crum?
Yeah, can I just get some clarification, Mr Chair, on just the way that we handle remits at Local Government New Zealand conferences, given that it may be since the authorisation of this report, maybe it's firmed up a bit, but in paragraph 5, what we're looking at here is just draft text of a proposed remit. So, you know, obviously this is going to take place, but we're not, are we sure of what the wording is that we are actually wanting to support here today? And picking up on Councillor Lee's comment, that I think beware of simplistic remits and, well, and their effectiveness for one thing, and also what could be a cat that could be skinned in a different way. So can I just get, are we, for all remits, we delegate authority to those who are attending the conference on our behalf to work on it? So are we going to be looking at all remits? Honestly, I forget the way that we handle remits at Local Government New Zealand conference. Why are we isolating this? Clarification,
Well,
please.
this one was one that was raised at the number 1 zone meeting at Whangarei. I was there, and it wasn't because of this was a remit, but I did show interest in this remit, and there's not a lot of remits. The remits are put in by the council that wants to move the remit, and then they go to a committee at Local Government New Zealand where they make a decision as to whether the remit warrants going forward. I don't think they have many remits at the conferences. It's limited because they have this clearinghouse meeting before the thing. So this is one that went forward, and we were asked whether we would be prepared to support this remit as other councils around New Zealand are, and that's how it's reached this stage of the proceedings. So I can't tell you what other remits there are. Councillor Webster may be able to tell us.
Can I just, before you do speak, Penny, can I just caution that we need to be consistent with the way that we address these matters? If we're going to delegate authority to those who are attending to deal with remits on our behalf, isolating one issue out and requesting that staff do, which is some great content, but staff go and take their time on drawing down more fully into some remits and not others. I think we should be having a consistent approach.
Well, Mr Chairman, I actually, at the last meeting, asked, it wasn't particularly on the remit, it was more to look into Local Government New Zealand and their concerns with community policing throughout New Zealand. As far as the remits are concerned, once the National Council AGM comes out, we'll know what remits there are, and I will bring that up at a meeting of councillors and see what we support and what we don't, which is how we usually do it, usually at a lunch or something.
So I'll just echo my earlier comment that we're debating and spending time, and staff have been spending time on something that we don't even know is going to surface.
Right. This is definitely
But
going to surface.
There is an issue.
It definitely is going to surface because it's been approved by the National Council Committee that deals with remits. Councillor Penrose.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Chair. And look, I think in taking the views and concerns that Councillor Crum has on board, and Councillor Webster raises, as we know, at one of our other meetings, the satellite stations for our community policing. And this has all come in light of of course, the new Health and Safety Act that have come in place. And it goes deeper than that. I mean, to say we've started a procedure with our own health and safety internal. And it was sad that only 4 councillors turned up to the South Friday week ago for the most important thing that we've got to deal with on council, health and safety. The police are no different. And look, having regular discussions with the Minister on this, Minister of Police on this, and having the comfort that Commissioner Bush, Mr Chair, has been reappointed for another 3 years, it's top of his priority list, I know, to make sure that we have, you know, the health and safety of those volunteers in those satellite stations first and foremost. You don't know when something's going to come to fruition in regards to an issue. But you know, they've made it very clear that they want to make sure that those satellite stations are there in their local communities, but they've got to overcome the problem and make it safe for all their members. So look, I think this will just spark a discussion and try and find the best way forward.
Thank you.
Sorry, could I just comment? I mean, I did ask at the last meeting that we have a report on it, and having spoken to both the Chair and to Mr Kimpton, it seemed that as Local Government New Zealand was doing the work on it anyway, rather than expect the staff to do a whole lot of work on it just for Auckland, I suggested that we actually work this way. So it's probably my fault that, in fact, I was trying to help the staff, not having to do a whole lot of work when the work's already being done at Local Government New Zealand.
Thank you. Councillor Cashmore.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. And I think no one would question the work that the police do and how vital it is for our community safety and the increasing population that we are experiencing. Resources probably need to be looked at and investigated, and also take on what Councillor Penrose has said about the community safety and the out hubs that need to be made correct and fit for purpose in those outer regions. So our discussion, and we take forward to the conference, will that also include not only the reactive services that the police do, but also the proactive services? So the things that community do, things that government agencies do around remitting and trying to rebate on crime?
Can you answer that?
So, no, generally, it's just the information that we've provided that Auckland Council's position will be put on. So we've found it really difficult to quantify in like monetary value or in other value the whole range of services that we do and other local governments do as well. So it is very difficult to get solid figures. So we wanted to present to you evidence. There's a lot of misinformation at the moment also in local government in the public arena about there's a freeze on policing numbers, things like that. We wanted to make sure you had a clear evidence base around any statements Auckland Council was making. So if we couldn't get you good evidence, we didn't put it in here.
Thank you, Katrina. Mr Chair, I think that brings up a very important point. This is not just a simple reactive issue. The policing, in particular community policing, it's a wraparound service, and it's quite complicated. There's a lot that goes with it. So although we can go in and say X number of population requires X number of police, and Queensland do it a lot better at 1 to 33 compared to us, then I would suggest it's more to it than that. It's about sentencing, it's about rehabilitation, it's about community advocacy and community delivery outcomes. I'd be very nervous about just going down with a straight data-based resolution to government.
Thank you. Councillor Brewer.
Well, thank you, Mr Chair. I certainly support what Councillor Cashmore is saying. I see the submission that I actually think it's kind of cherry-picking some of the stats there, and I accept that the staff numbers may be static. I accept that per capita investment for Auckland may be behind nationwide, and I accept that the resolution rates in Auckland may be behind per capita. But when you look on the police website, and again it's the police website, not the National Party website, and you look at the Auckland district areas, Auckland Central, Eastern and Western, and talking as Councillor Cashmore was about the proactive role, one could easily write a submission that argued that compared to May 16, compared to May 15, the preventative activities on the street at reducing crime and victimisation, the number of activities that the police have proactively done successfully has increased when you look at pre-warning charges, road checkpoints, vehicle stop, foot patrols, drunks taken home, detox. And then when you look at offences that police have proactively discovered or detected, drug supply, drug use, disorder, assaults, they too, those proactive numbers have also increased. So I think it's actually quite a balanced call, and we're looking at some stats, but we also need to go there with some positive statistics in mind as well. But in saying that, I support this, because when you do look at the offences being reported May 16 to May 15, overall they are up. When you look at serious assaults, public place assaults in the wider Auckland district, dwelling assaults, robbery, burglary, vehicles stolen is reported is down somewhat from May 16 to May 15. So overall, the reported crime is up on the last 12 months from May 16 to May 15. But may I just put on the record, Mr. Chair, that some of the preventative activities and proactive work that the police have been doing is equally up and showing some good positive results as far as nipping some of the crime activity in the bud before it even occurs. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lee.
Yeah, the last thing we need, I think, at the local government conference is some sort of proxy party political argument with some people piling on to attack the government, and then people who support the government reacting in defence, and then that would actually not be helpful at all. What I think we need to be a little bit more specific, first of all, in emphasising the great confidence that the public has in seeing the police about, with police presence, physical presence, and that the funding that we are asking for is not having a go at Mr. English or anyone, and it's not a funding for the police administration or bureaucracy. It's for, and I'd like to add, including increased foot patrols in our cities and towns by sworn police officers, because when you say community policing, that means could be police patrols stopping people on Waiheke Island and breath testing them, which they do apparently very heavily, but that's not what we're looking for here. We're looking for boots on the ground. We're looking for people on the beat, and talking about people on the beat is probably a cliche, so foot patrols in our cities and towns is something we need to be specific about. Otherwise, A, we could end up with a great big political argument, and B, achieve increased money for the police, and it all ends up going into computers or whatever.
Thank you. And Councillor Penrose. And then
Yeah, just quickly, just to run up, there's some good comments been made here this morning, Mr. Chair, and this is I don't see this by any means attacking police and attacking the government. No. I see this as actually working together. And as we well know, there's some good stats being registered here this morning, but one of the biggest concerns we have across New Zealand is domestic violence, and domestic violence is hugely on the increase, which takes our iCars off the road for an hour to an hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours maximum. And then, of course, that strains our policing. The police do a fantastic job. We just need to get them behind them and support them.
Thank you. Councillor Fletcher.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I support this, but like Councillor Cashmore, these are complex issues, and I wouldn't want to see the advocacy being put forward solely on numbers. I think the government have to understand that they do carry responsibility for passing legislation that is going to enable us. I mean, I pick up the vexed issue of fare evasion. You know, the inability to be able to have the appropriate enforcements means that if you take the current situation, which has had publicity at the moment at Green Lane, where kids are jumping on the train, they're getting off the train, they're becoming window washers. So I don't want to spend time on this, but just to encourage those who are putting this work together and the advocacy for it, that there can be a comprehensive approach to the needs that Auckland requires, because often those police that we do have can be greatly assisted by making sure that they've got the necessary legislative enforcement tools, which has, I think, been a bit of a gap for us.
Thank you. And Councillor Crum.
Yes, Mr. Chair, can I just get clarification, please? Is there someone in the room that could answer my previous question in regards to our normal course, our normal process for how we handle Local Government New Zealand remits at the conference?
Well, we usually discuss it with councillors once the papers come out
Exactly.
and decide
So-
what we're going to do.
So we get all the remits through committee.
We don't
And-
do it through, we've never done it through a committee. We just get together and talk about the remits that are coming up at conference.
In an informal capacity. So this is unusual.
Yeah.
Thank you. No other speakers? I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Against? Declare that carried. Thank you. We now move to
11.
Regional Environmental Natural Heritage Grant Program Review. Dr. Fran and Quinton, thank you, and Dodd, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Quentin Espy. This is Dr. Dalziel and Fran Hayson on my right. This report, which is to request approval to adopt the 2016-2017 Regional Environmental and Natural Heritage Grant Program Framework, including some changes from last year, is being presented to your committee because you have the necessary decision-making powers and there's no timely Environment, Climate Change and Natural Heritage Committee meeting beforehand. The grant program focuses on 4 issues. Firstly, sustainable living with respect to, for example, energy and water, and with an emphasis on best practice, behavioural change and reach. Secondly, biodiversity with an emphasis on land ecosystem enhancement against trend through conservation and biosecurity initiatives. The details are in the report. Thirdly, healthy water with an emphasis on aquatic ecosystem enhancement against trend and human health protection. And fourthly, on kaitiakitanga, such that the projects empower mana whenua in their role as kaitiaki for Auckland's natural environment. The requirement of Resolution N2015/33 from the Environment, Climate Change and Natural Heritage Commission has been implemented in this report. The resolution requested staff to put in place a process that identifies assessment and measurement of fund outcomes in general, and particularly for outcome 1, which is the Maori of the natural environment is in optimal health, and outcome 6, which is manu whenua are empowered, enabled, respected and recognised in their customary kaitiaki role and participate in the co-management of natural resources. This recommended process is shown in, if you'd like to look in your reports, Table 2 on page 21 and paragraph 23 on page 22. The details for assessment and measurement pertinent to outcomes 1 and 6 can be found in paragraphs 24 to 33 on pages 22 and 23. The recommended changes made as a result of the review, see paragraph 6, page 19 for a summary, are an update of the grant framework, including the grant assessment process and criteria. These changes are updating regional significant criteria, reframing assessment criteria, and creating a panel to assess applications, including a specialist in Maori outcomes. In summary, if the report is approved, the Environment, Climate Change and Natural Heritage Committee resolution will have been addressed, and the grant process improvements will be put into place to assess and measure fund outcomes accordingly. This encompasses a change to assessment criteria, including specific assessment against Maori outcomes. Thank you.
Councillor Fletcher, you have a question?
Mr. Chairman, I want to address my questions. If I can refer members to page 21 and the table that we have on the changes to regionally significant criteria. My question to you comes from the basis that I think we have too little allocated in terms of addressing Kari dieback, and another, I could list a whole range of outcomes that I would like to see Auckland Council be more proactive about. And my fear is, with what you're proposing, that the direction in terms of empowerment of mana whenua is laudable, but is that going to be further at the expense of some of the specific environmental outcomes that we're looking for there has been too little money in this area, in my opinion, for the outcomes that we seek, and I would like you to answer it as honestly as you can as to whether this is going to further diminish what are meagre resources for monumentally challenging issues.
I'd love to answer that through the chair. I think that's, there are very serious, important questions that you're asking behind this that probably the RENH, Regional Environment and Natural Heritage grant funding by itself can't address. Nevertheless, within the constraints of that budget, what we have seen is a significant overlap between the regionally significant environmental issues that Council as a whole is trying to address and the exercise of kaitiakitanga. So we're in a blessed situation where there is very strong overlap. For example, particularly in the water quality space, there's very clear indications from mana whenua that that's a strong area of interest regionally and locally and by rohi. And we also have quite significant mana whenua engagement in Kauri dieback at the regional tranche of the national response. So mana whenua engagement, not through Regional Environment and Natural Heritage grant funding, but through engagement on that process. So my assessment, our assessment would be at this point in time that there's very strong overlap.
I guess that it is important that we are motivating as many groups as we possibly can to leverage the funds that we have to get wider support and outcomes here. So I take some comfort from your response, but I just want to be assured that we can work with volunteers and groups right across the whole spectrum who may also be able to leverage other funds from other philanthropic organisations. So, it's that seed, isn't it, that you can plant that might grow. Just wanting to make sure it's being well used.
Thank you for that. Through the chair, thank you. We've recorded that concern and that interest. And I think that we need to come back with some assessment after this funding round that shows that helps to answer that question.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Webster?
Oh yes, very quickly, seeing Councillor Fletcher mentioned it, are we working with MPI and DOC on the Kauri dieback issue? I mean, Auckland Council is doing a lot, but are they reporting back to us on that, what they're doing?
Oh, through the chair, that's beyond my particular purview.
Okay, maybe.
But we can bring back an answer.
Maybe we should be asking them to go to the environment.
At the back, there is. Okay. With that, I'll move the recommendation.
I want to speak.
Oh, Councillor. You want to speak?
Yes, please, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I have some concerns about this, and I'm aware of the trends, the political trends within the council and the council administration, not just necessarily around the council table. But this, we are talking about an environmental natural heritage grant program, not a social heritage or a cultural heritage or an ethnic heritage. And this program or these criteria muddle these things up. This is a modest enough program, but it is dedicated to the regional environment. Instead, we've got that being hijacked to talk about empowering mana whenua and regarding co-management of natural resources. That's a political agenda. It may, it may be a worthy agenda for one part of the community to demand co-management. That's another debate. However, it should not be involved in a natural heritage grant program, which is really to assist the volunteers of all ethnic backgrounds who do a lot of work out there, is to empower them to help protect our natural heritage, heritage that goes back 70 million, 80 million, 100 million years, not just several hundred years, when different groups arrived here. I think we have to oppose that, Mr. Chairman, and remove the bit about empowering mana whenua. That's about politics, and also the bit about co-management of natural resources.
Well,
that is not helpful.
Okay, Councillor Lee, if you wish to move to that, I'll move. I'm going to put the motion on the floor. Is there a seconder for the motion? Yep. Councillor Philippina. So it's on the floor now. It looks like we've jumped it. Councillor Cashmore, have you got a...
I just had a question, sir, on the actual policy. Where have I got it here now? So it's page 25, and it's to do with the eligibility. And we're saying here that projects can be undertaken by public, private, or on Maori land. Don't have a problem with any of that. Is there any hierarchical order of that, or is the hierarchical order of allocating the grants purely based upon the outcomes that are going to be delivered from that grant?
Yeah, the assessment of applications is based on the outcomes the project would support.
And if I further, Mr. Chair, what is the ongoing, I guess, checks or audit of that those things have actually been delivered and are continually to be maintained and managed for which the grant was allocated?
So as part of the contestable funding process, we have a range of accountability requirements for all grant recipients. They are required to provide receipts for use of all grant funding, and then kind of photos and follow-up site visits are taken, particularly for our larger grants.
And that goes on for a number of years post-delivery. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Wayne Walker.
Sure. I just want to endorse the comments that Councillor Lee is making, and particularly it goes to co-management. And in particular, if that co-management is 50-50 or the like, when we've got our backs to the wall on funding. If we take the example of Carrie Dieback, DOC is dropping the ball. They're reducing their funding. Funding generally that's available from other sources outside of council is dropping through Lotto, through a range of areas. So I come back to this issue of co-management and costs and what council can do. And if we look at the impact of that across council, across hearings, across projects, across issues like this, what you see is massive increases in the costs and less cost that actually is going to where it needs to be, which is the work on the ground. And that is my concern. This is another example of it, and we really need some analysis of this openly and transparently, so we've got a handle on what's actually going on. In the Hauraki Gulf Forum, we've got a proposed change in the governance, the co-governance, which is of great concern and will add considerably to cost.
Get to the issues at hand, please.
The issue is about these evaluative criteria and, frankly, the costs that we're going to have involving more people and especially more iwi in the decision-making process.
Thank you. Now, the Deputy Mayor, did you wish to make a comment?
Oh, Mr. Chair, I don't know where to start with this. Surely, am I completely missing the point? But if we partner with iwi and with the support for Māori outcomes, surely that's the opportunity that we would have to work with iwi organisations with their own money and their own passion for stewardship of the natural environment, and actually use the opportunity to double the small and paltry amount of money that we have available for this. I think there's a complete missing of the point here, that this is all about trying to grow the putia that we've got by sharing the job with the community.
Thank you. Councillor Webster.
Yes, thank you. Look, I support this. I have seen, and there was I wish I'd brought it in, there was a lovely story on the front of our local paper recently about some farmers who had actually got a grant and fenced off bush, which they do in many areas of Auckland. That's why you can look out the window and see some amazing bush, and if you drive through the countryside, and often fencing is one of the issues that is quite expensive and getting more expensive, and when you see some of the waterways and the bush blocks that have been fenced off with help, not totally council, but with help, and that's the public-private partnerships that we're getting. And, you know, in the recent Balance Environment Awards that were won by the Helensville couple, the amount of fencing that they'd done of bush blocks, and yes, some of that probably did come from council, but that's what we're after, and it's all to do with sustainable living. And it says here, there's clear evidence that the project will motivate and empower Aucklanders to adopt more environmentally sustainable lifestyles. And I can't see why councils wouldn't support this.
Councillor Fletcher.
Mr. Chairman, I think in the discussion, I would like some guidance from Dean Kimpton here, because what, Dean, you are hearing is a desire that in terms of biodiversity, that is going to be the primary driver in the analysis. I totally concur with Councillor Webster. I mean, the future is going to be about partnerships. So if you look at page 23, we are putting a lot more weighting on mana whenua in terms of their role as kaitiaki. That is all really laudable. I'm not disputing their role, but what I am wanting assurances on, because it is such a paltry sum when we are trying to consider what we, you know, the scale of this whole region, I want to see the primary weighting being on outcomes. So is there some guidance you can give me that gives me comfort in voting for this, that we could have some additional words in the adoption of this framework that actually gives a belts and braces assurance that it will be outcomes focused?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, can I just mention something from the table? It says the Maori outcomes weighting is 10%.
So, thank you for that. I was looking at table 2, which is how you've sought to allocate weighting based on different outcome criteria, and there's 10% weighting there, Councillor Fletcher. So that is the weighting that is given.
I understand that, but I think
you're wanting something else.
Maybe alignment with strategic priorities was 40% in the past. Applicants' capacity 20% in the past. You know, maybe we could change some of those weightings around. I just know the challenge that it is to be trying to get some of those funds and grow those funds, and I want, and it's a difficult conversation to have, because I don't want to in any way denigrate the objectives of the council in the work that we are doing with mana whenua, but we do need to be explicit, absolutely explicit in the boundaries that we're setting for that, so that there can be good relationships into the future.
I'm lacking the wisdom of Solomon right now in terms of how to provide the guidance that you seek. We have the regional significance criteria, which is on table 1. So it's against those criteria that any proposal is considered. Do they achieve those significance criteria? I think we're wise to try and remember that in the role of as kaitiaki, the outcomes are looking to achieve are in many cases common with what we're trying to achieve. as more broadly, and the criteria against which they're assessed in Table 2. I mean, short of reallocating the assessment criteria and focusing it perhaps back on what we had in the old criteria, but acknowledging that we want to come back and also test that it delivers on Māori outcomes and maybe one or two others, I'm not sure how you handle this issue. You either take away the weighting criteria and leave it there as, and we want you to acknowledge or demonstrate how you'll deliver on these outcomes, but have no weighting on them, or you have a weighting on it. And that's my somewhat unhelpful advice. I think you're going to end up debating percentages if we continue down this track.
Oh, well, I don't want to delay the time of the committee today, but I would just say to officers that for the future, when we're pulling these sorts of weightings together, that we endeavour as best we can. I am really interested that we can deliver a lot more in this sector, and I'm uncomfortable at times with our inability to do so.
Thank you. So, Councillor Lee, this is on the floor, it's been moved and seconded, now you've come up with an amendment. Your amendment is?
It's to outcome 6, Mr Chairman, and my amendment would read, mana whenua are enabled, respected and recognised in their customary kaitiaki role over natural resources. It takes out the word empowered and participating co-management, which are essentially political aspects and not really much to do with protecting the natural environment and natural heritage. But the role is acknowledged.
So, okay, Councillor Lee's put this up as an amendment.
So, through the chair, that outcome is taken from the community grants policy adopted by council in December 2000.
Well, that's community development is a little different from natural heritage, and that's exactly my point.
Order. But that's a policy. Now, if any member of the committee wishes to second Councillor Watson wishes to second it. I don't think there's probably need for any debate on this.
So,
totally disagree.
Chair, sorry, Chair, I totally disagree with C, especially after the advice that we've received. Obviously, it's just another way of Māori bashing.
Order.
For goodness sake.
Sorry.
Look, withdraw that. Councillor withdraw that.
Sorry, Chair, look, that's my, hold on, Chair, let me finish. That's my impression in regards to this, after what staff have said around the policy. It's a policy, it's worded in there. So what is the only reason around getting rid of what's in our policy that the council has adopted, Chair? So that's my question to you before, and I'm not going to withdraw it because it's in policy. So what C is going to do, and it may be C or the A, is basically saying let's disregard the policy that is currently in place around community development. Let's disregard that, and in this particular issue, let's rearrange the words and go against the policy that's currently in existence, Chair. So that's my impression, and that's exactly what I've put on the table around this. I definitely didn't want to say anything when Councillor Lee mentioned it, because I'm used to hearing everything that he says in regards to Māori. So my question is then, Chair, are we going against policy as a result of what our staff member have said? So that's my question to you, Chair, and I'll be good to sort of get some advice.
Point of order, Mr Chairman.
Councillor, point of order. What's your point of order?
Mr Chairman, the motivations of Councillor Lee were called into question. They were preceded by the term Maori bashing, and I think it's a very highly offensive of Councillor Filipaina to accuse another member of basically a dishonourable act. And I think you ought to rule on that, Mr. Chairman. I think Councillor Filipaina was...
Point of order, Chair. Well, hold on. This is the point of order in regards to it. My comment was saying that, for me, that sounded like Maori bashing, and this is what I've said. Chair, my point of order...
Councillor Filipaina.
Chair, is there any other word that I could use then?
I think you could have used a more proper word instead of being
bashing of Māori.
Can I respond, Mr. Chairman, to that point of order?
I've asked the question.
Can I respond?
I've asked the question.
Maori are not even mentioned here. Mana whenua.
Order.
That's the problem.
I ask you to withdraw those words.
As in Māori bashing?
Yes, please.
I withdraw Māori bashing because Councillor Lees knows what the situation is.
Okay,
so, Chair, my question, and I've asked this question, are we going against policy in regards to the recommendation that Councillor Lee has put up? Are we going against policy that is already adopted?
Mr. Kimpton can...
So I'm going to refer it, because you've already confirmed that we've adopted a policy for community development that has this particular wording, and the question... Oh, it's right.
But we can't change it for this.
Yeah, the wording in outcome 6 is included in the community grants policy.
So the question is whether we wish to change it specifically for this or not.
Environmental natural heritage.
Sorry, Chair, I'm just waiting for staff instead of getting interrupted by councillors.
Order, Council.
So I think that's the question before you. You have a community development policy. You've adopted this wording for outcome 6. The question is whether you will have different wording for this outcome for this particular policy.
Well, they're two different... Can I respond to that, Mr. Chairman?
No, I just asked Mr. Kimpton, is it possible to do that in the circumstances?
They're two different programs.
Order.
I certainly said they're two different programs, Councillor Lee. The question is, can we do that in the moment? I want to think about that, but is there any question, any response from the bench there?
Just for clarity, the community grant policy sets out the regional environment grant program. So the community grant policy sets the direction for this program.
Okay, well, I think it's a matter the council will have to vote on now. Then.
My caution is making policy decisions on the hoof.
Yep.
And so my advice is if you're uncomfortable with this wording, then we need to provide you proper advice around its implications as it relates to other related policies. And I think what you're hearing from myself and both staff is that we've not been able to give you that sort of advice, to give you that sort of, to support that sort of decision in the moment.
So, well, I'd like to take a vote.
So, well, Mr. Chairman, I think we have to be careful, and I'm going to vote against this amendment. And the reason is we actually already have many co-management of natural resources in this council.
Too many.
Not too many. I mean, we're moving towards the Kaipara Harbour, we've got the Monga Authority, we've got all sorts of things to do with the natural environment, where we're working very closely with mana whenua. And to then suddenly say, well, actually we'll do it, but not in co-management in a policy like this is just ridiculous, and
right.
You can't vote for it.
Thank you. I'm going to take what Councillor Cashmore just...
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think it would be very dangerous and perhaps even unprecedented for the council to change what is a policy recently adopted like this, as Mr. Kent said, on the hoof and reactionary.
But this has been changed.
I haven't got the floor. So
whether
you are speaking for or against this doesn't matter. This is not the place or time to do it. If we want to change the policy, let's do that when we review the policy.
Okay,
we are changing the policy.
We'll have a vote.
That's the whole point.
We'll do it by division.
Councillor Anai.
Aye.
Councillor Brewer.
It's for the amendment.
This is the amendment. Are you aware this is the amendment?
I'm sure he knows that. I'm sure he knows that.
He knows
that.
We're having a vote.
Councillor Casey.
Is this on the amendment?
Yeah.
No.
Councillor Cashmore?
No.
Councillor Clow?
No.
Councillor Filipina?
Against.
Councillor Fletcher?
For.
Edmure Hulse?
No.
Councillor Crum?
Against.
Councillor Lee?
Aye.
Member McDonald?
Against.
Councillor Penrose?
No.
Councillor Quacks?
No.
Councillor Stewart?
No.
Councillor Sir John Walker? Councillor Wayne Walker?
Yes.
Councillor Watson? For. Councillor Webster?
No.
Chair Wood?
No.
So it's lost 13-6.
Lost 13-6, so the amendment, what didn't get, was not part of the motion. So we'll now go back to the original motion. I think everybody's spoken.
Just have some clarity on this. This recommendation is a change of policy, right?
With a report.
No, it's a policy. If you look at the...
We're changing the policy to include those words.
Just
want to
it's the
clarify.
document
Change of
which-
policy
there seems to
from
be
the
some
last
confusion.
It's the
financial year.
framework.
That we're not
for
allowed
the-
to change policies.
It's
We
the
are doing
framework.
it now.
Look, I'm going to speak now as my right of reply. This is a framework for the allocation of the funds in this particular budget of council. It's a yearly grants program that we run for this particular activity. It has this year in the budget $488,710, of which there are we've got 63 applications for 1.3 million. So there's going to need to be criteria in relation to how the allocations are made. But this is a area of council business which has been said that we can benefit and maximise this money by working with community groups in this area of enhancing and maintaining the natural environment across broad areas of council business. So I think it's an area that we maximise the benefits and we get excellent returns from the allocation of these funds. So councillors, it's a way forward so that we've got a criteria for the allocation. I'd ask you to support this and ask that we'll now take the vote. I'll put the motion.
Mr. Chairman, just a clarification on B, and I've listened carefully to what Councillor Lee has said, and when we talk about further minor changes to the grant framework, what are we actually talking about there? Maybe we can get a bit of a heads up on that, because
well, I think
minor changes to some minor changes. No, Mr. Chairman, just let me finish, please.
No. Well, that was my right of reply. You always say that after right of reply you can't have comment. So you're
well, it was a question, as a matter of fact, Mr. Chairman, not a long-winded speech, which I'm trying to avoid.
Just clarify what those changes would be.
So the grant program framework sets out the eligibility criteria for the fund, which is driven by the community grants policy. Those minor changes would be around certain exclusions that may kind of apply for a funding round. The exact dates for the funding round, wording changes to the assessment criteria.
Thank you. Right, I'll put the motion.
Well,
I'll put the motion. I'm going to put the motion. You vote
I just want to make a comment on that.
No, I've had my right of reply. I've had my right of reply, so there's no further discussion.
Division.
I said it was in my right of reply, clearly, saying I'm sorry.
I think somebody just threw a forward pass.
What a division's been called.
Division's been called.
The analogy just keeps going. Councillor Brewer.
For.
Councillor Casey.
Yes.
Councillor Cashmore.
Yes.
Councillor Clow.
Yes.
Sorry, just one moment.
We want the fund to proceed. It's just, we've had a debate about the focus.
Councillor Filipina.
For.
Councillor Fletcher.
For.
Deputy Mayor Hulse.
Aye.
Councillor Crum.
For.
Councillor Lee.
No.
The McDonald.
No.
Councillor Penrose.
Yes.
Councillor Quacks.
It's for the substantive.
Councillor Stewart.
No.
Sir John Walker. Councillor Wayne Walker.
No.
Councillor Watson. No. Councillor Webster.
Yes.
Chair Wood.
Yes. So that's been passed by 14 to 5.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. I think there was some confusion by our colleague here, and I invite you to reconsider his vote. He might have a different vote.
I wanted to vote yes, sorry.
Member McDonald. Yes. Okay.
I think when I voted yes, it confused everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll now move to the next item, and
Voters' remorse.
I don't agree.
have I become the Craig Jabir yet, Councillor Quacks?
He's very good, Mr. Chairman. Much better than Wayne Barnes.
Hello, Lee.
You'll be able to quieten things down here with a very straightforward paper here today. Thank you.
Not after last
Because
time.
that's generally what happens when I'm here, Mr. Chair.
Sometimes.
Thank you, Letitia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. The property I'm here to discuss today comprises two parcels of 51 Stamford Park Road in Mount Roskill. The cumulative total of the two parcels of land is just over 1,700 square metres. The two subject sites are part of a larger council-owned site which comprises nearly 4,000 square metres. The site was originally acquired by the Crown for the extension of State Highway 20 through Mount Roskill. It was subsequently vested in Auckland City Council as recreation reserve, and most of the entire site was formed as walking and cycleway that leads to Keith Hay Park and is to be retained in council ownership for this purpose. The subject parcels of land that are up for consideration today were not required for the walking and cycleway and were identified by the Parks and Recreation Policy Team in 2015 has not been required for parks purposes. The rationalisation process for these two parcels of land commenced in August 2015. No alternative service uses were identified, and the feedback we've received has been supportive of the proposed reserve revocation and divestment. Final revocation of the reserve status will be subject to completing the statutory requirements set out in the Reserves Act 1977, and I'd just like to note that the sale proceeds from reserves are placed in reserves accounts so that funds can be used to acquire other land for reserve purposes or the maintenance of existing reserves. Happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Fletcher?
I was just going to move
it. You'll move it?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Councillor Clow. I don't think there's any...
Mr. Chair, just a...
Councillor Brewer.
Oh, just a point of clarification in the executive summary. It notes here that Panuku is required to come up with a combined sale value of 45 million to the year June 30, 2017. Yet my understanding in the long-term plan it was the divestment program is more like 66 million a year. So I just wondered if there was a point of clarification that perhaps there's divestment going on outside Panuku's remit. But I just invite comment from officers on that.
Through the Chair, yes, our SOI target is based on what we believe we can deliver every year. That was set independently of the of the 66 million, I think it is, per year in the LTP.
Okay, so this reflects your SOI, not our 10-year budget. Thank you.
Right, it's moved and seconded. I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Against? Declare that carried. Thank you, Letitia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Easy.
Next item is 13, and we have Christine Olsen from Community Empowerment Manager here for this item, and Graham Bodman is here as well. Top team. Christine, thank you very much. You're going to give us a run through on how things are going in this area. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this report is an update as requested from this committee in June last year. The committee requested an update in July on the implementation of the Empowered Communities approach. So the report sets out the focus that the Community Empowerment Unit has had in implementation. It gives some examples of some empowered community approach examples that have been going on in the community, and also outlines the feedback we've had from local boards. So just coming around now is I think there were 2 local boards that hadn't had their business meetings by the time the report was due, so they're coming now, and just some other overview information of the Empowered Communities approach. Councillor Wood has asked me to give you a little, very brief presentation about the structure of the unit, and so I've just got a couple of slides here. So the unit is made up of 5 teams. 2 of those teams, Youth Connections and the Community Contracts team, are the Community Contracts team is funded mainly through external contracts, and Youth Connections jointly with the Tyndall Foundation. So the other 3 teams are focused very much on the delivery of the Empowered Communities approach through local boards and through our regional work programme. So we have 19 strategic brokers across the 21 local boards. They're based in local board offices and working very closely on the delivery of those local board work programs.
Thanks, ma'am.
And then we have what we call the practice hub, which is made up of the operations team and our practice team. And the purpose of that team is to provide technical and specialist support for delivery and to develop the practice across council of the Empowered Communities approach. So I can make this work. You see the practice hub and the strategic brokers working together. And just finally, Councillor Wood had asked, sorry, that's quite hard to see, but that gives you the name of the strategic broker assigned to each local board. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Right, are there any questions? Kathy.
How do governing body members fit into the model?
Well, through the chair, the team's got 2 areas of focus. So it delivers on and provides advice to local board work programs and priority activities, and then also has a regional work program which is driven by policy, which is determined by the governing body or through other requests or responses that may come through the governing body or from other sources. For instance, our response to homelessness or graffiti eradication and a number of other regional program activity.
Got the regional link. How do the local councils link into the model? In terms of wearing a ward councillor hat?
As usual, missed out.
Through the chair, to be honest, I haven't thought about that specifically, but I would imagine that the way things happen at the moment is that councillors may approach either myself or Christine with any specific queries that may occur or influence some broader policy decisions. What we're trying to do is be much more structured, or to be structured in our approach through having agreed work programs, but we've built in some room for flexible responses, acknowledging that we're working in quite a dynamic environment, and requests or work could come from multiple sources, which we can respond to on a as required basis.
If I might just continue the dialogue, Mr. Chairman, my feeling is just a little bit apart from this, as the ward councillor, that this is something that we're doing with boards, that boards are driving from the bottom up. And we need to link into it somehow, and I don't feel linked into this. Even though we developed the policy, we had really good linkage to develop the policy that got us to here, I feel now that we're kind of... So it was about knowing what's going on in the ward, knowing where everything's at, how do we stay connected with this?
Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you. Graham, I applaud the approach that you've taken to this, but I just draw your attention to the request that we made through the CEO that there be special recognition of the Pacifica community, and I'd like, in the examples that you've given us, I'd just be really interested to see how you see the empowered communities approach improving within the Pacifica community.
So one of the 5 key focus areas is about increasing diverse participation, and I guess through that Pacifica is a key stakeholder. We are certainly looking at, one of our key initiatives is looking at how we work more diversely and how we are more inclusive. We have a number of Pacifica staff who are closely linked to their communities and to projects within communities.
Mr. Chairman, through you, I thank Christine for that response, but this was a matter that has been explored right through to the CEO committee, and that when we're talking about diversity, that is good, but when you think of the responsibility we have for having the largest population of Pacifica people in the world, in this city, my view would be that it would be good to see some specific reference, rather than in the umbrella of diversity, some reference to Pacifica peoples. So I would ask you, Mr. Chairman, if that could be entertained. Is there any guidance that you can give me at this point on how that could be achieved?
Through the chair, we can make sure that we get some examples of some of the work we're doing in the Pacifica community, and I can assure you that it's a key focus of ours. Is that helpful?
Thank you. Mr. McDonald.
Yeah, I was just going to ask a question really around the, Māori responsiveness aspects within this ECA and within this approach. When you go to evaluate it at the end of the day, what sorts of things would you be looking for in that evaluation to see that this approach has been responsive to Māori and to other communities?
Through the chair. So our evaluation plan has just been signed off, and we have Shaw and Whāriki, so they have been contracted to do that over 3 years, and they have a key focus on measuring outcomes for Māori, and we have been talking with the mana whenua huru around the development of case studies for that evaluation and how to make sure that we are including Māori specifically, the Māori voice specifically in that evaluation.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. I just want to support Councillor Casey. And it's I think a discussion to be picked up in the next council, which flows over into the discussion about the relationship between ward councillors and local boards, and I think part of this work needs to be addressed during that discussion, because I think there are some gaps. So my question is how we look at these very, very good examples, and some of which I know well, how we keep an overall picture of the fact that we're still trying to work cohesively and collaboratively as one enormous organisation driving a series of goals that will be delivered in a place-based way, in a way that suits the community. But our local boards, it's very easy to hand out some slugs of money and do things, you know. I mean, there are some grants of slightly questionable origin that have come to my notice in the last little while that don't necessarily link into the big picture. So, you know, somehow it's saying empower down at grassroots level, link in via the boards to the local councillors, and that gives that bigger picture about the fact that we're still trying to achieve the goals of the organisation. So somewhere in there, Mr. Chair, is a slightly long-winded question for how are we measuring if we're getting along that path? Are we measuring if we're making progress along that path?
Through the Chair, I think there's two responses to that, and hopefully they answer your question. I think for the first time, because we have come together as one unit, we are able to look at all 21 local board work programs and actually pull out what are the practice themes in there, so that we can actually build consistent practice. Obviously being responsive to local need, which is always going to be diverse, but actually having some consistent practice that sits around that, and we're also picking that up through our regional work program. And in terms of evaluation, I think that's probably something that will be picked up through the evaluation process.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that addresses the issue. It's just making sure that with a lot of these that we've got time, space and a bit of funding for evaluation, because each board will have its work program, quite right. Some of it will be suited to each local community. Absolutely, that's what community empowerment is. But somewhere it still needs to contribute towards the greater whole, because there is, you know, the boards, despite what we hear from the boards, there is a lot of money within those board budgets that still needs to be contributing towards the sum of the greater whole. And I think it's quite right that the local councillors feel that they've got a role in the oversight and understanding and partnering with that.
Councillor Watson? Oh, sorry.
Sorry, if I may, through the Chair, just in response to that, when our staff give advice to local boards, which we do for all funding recommendation, for example, we always make sure that our advice is framed in the context of the Auckland Plan and the organisational priorities, as well as responding to the local board priorities. So, you know, I guess where we're sitting, we definitely see that we're serving the organisation as a whole, which includes governing body and local boards, and looking to work towards a cohesive strategic direction in the advice that we provide.
Thank you. Councillor Watson, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Graham and Christine, for your work on this. My question just goes to this little section, what is meant by an enabling council, and I see there's, in particular, there's a reference to requiring a change in processes and attitudes, and I think one of the other councillors alluded to it earlier. In a situation where a community wants to do something, and theoretically or legally they could be liable for 3 years imprisonment and $100,000 fine, which is actually what some groups are being told when they're looking to do something pretty basic. In this instance, it was just using a weed eater, essentially. That was what. So what really concerns me is that on a practical level, that the change in attitude, or the enabling part of the equation of enabling the communities, is a little less certain as to what approach could be taken in any given circumstance where, yes, all these terrible things could happen, but really it's a pretty straightforward task, and let's have common sense prevail. How do we get past that situation? Is it just purely by a far more definitive directive in terms of attitude, or do you have some other idea?
Through the Chair, I think The Enabling Council initiative is about exactly that. It's about, you can't have an empowered community without a council that is supporting and enabling them to do what they want to do. And it's, so the initiative is about how do we drive a culture change across the whole of council. Culture change doesn't happen overnight. It's a process, and that's why the initiative is a 3-year initiative. But there are also live situations happening right now. We have 2 roles in our practice team whose title is Specialist Advisor Council Enablement. So their role is to pick up those issues exactly like the one you mentioned, and to work with the other parts of council to try and find solutions. And I know in the Weed Eater example, it took a long time, but we did get a solution in the end. And hopefully as the initiative picks up, we'll be able to get those solutions a lot more quickly. And so I guess it's a twofold thing. It's about taking individual issues now, and it's also about having a more strategic overview that says how are we going to change the culture across council.
Thank you. Councillor Pulpaina.
Thank you, Chair. When the whole empowerment community's approach was adopted, there were some local boards that weren't very supportive of it. What are you now finding around the feedback and communication with the local boards? I mean, there must be a feel now around, yes, we still don't support it because of these issues, or look, it's actually, now that it's been slowly implemented, it's actually working for the area. So I just invite a comment on that, please.
Sure. Through the chair. So we did quite an extensive piece of seeking feedback from the local boards for this report, and you'll see we've themed in the that part of the report, we've themed the feedback. There were some local boards that felt it was too soon to give feedback. Generally, the sense was, I think, in terms of the theming, the support of the strategic brokers was unanimous from every local board. They, possibly a concern about the breadth of the role of the strategic broker, but very supportive. And concerns around the transition process and the issue that was mentioned earlier around actually, the issues that we're facing as a local board are across council, and so this needs to be a whole of council thing, not just a unit over there. So I think it's still early days, but I think we have made good progress. The other theme I think that came through was we know our strategic broker because we see them and we see what they're doing, but we're not so clear about the role and the work of the practice hub. So I think that's a good challenge for our unit to look at how we can make the work of the practice hub a lot more transparent and visible to local boards. I think the feedback was good because it gave us some key areas to focus on, and I think we've made progress.
Cool. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Quacks.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wonder, is this document, is this part of the council record? Will this be part of the council record?
Well, I'm not quite sure what you mean by the council record, but it's a document that we've pulled together, through the chair, to simplify our communication of what the Empowered Communities approach is about, and as a reference material for staff primarily. So it's an internal staff reference document.
Well, I'm yeah, okay. Well, then I'm somewhat troubled by the comments under treaty partnership that Maori have historically experienced exclusion from local government. That's not true in all cases, and I think it's a very broad brush approach to take. And if I look back at the Legacy Manukau Council in my last term there, I think we had 3 Maori members on that. So I wonder if it would be more useful to be a little bit more positive in our comments about the effort that this council is making to include Maori, mana whenua, in local government and the process through the Independent Maori Statutory Board, through the co-governance partnerships that we have, rather than perhaps dwelling on negatives. Perhaps it would be more appropriate to look at what we're doing well rather than what historically some councils have not been able to achieve, or some Maori have not been able to achieve by getting themselves elected onto councils. Is that reasonable?
No, I think that, well, that can, what would you?
Through the chair, yeah, it's a good point. We'll take it on board.
Thank you.
Well, we'll put in the motion then that we amend the treaty partnership section to reflect those points. How's that?
Thank you,
What
Mr.
about
Chairman.
the Pacifica community? Can we put that in?
I think that's
too?
covered, Mr. Chairman.
Oh,
It's covered. I think that's, well, I looked at that and I thought when Councillor Fletcher raised that, I think she raised a very good point. But I do think that's probably more, that is probably covered under social inclusion and equity.
Okay, we'll
I'm not sure independent Māori statutory.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Councillor Cashmore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Graham and Christine, well done. The birth of this empowered communities was not easy, and we know it took some local boards and some politicians had to be dragged kicking and screaming into the reality of actually the huge volume and worth of our volunteers in our areas and what they are worth to our communities and to us as a council. So thank you for that work. How has the assimilation of existing activities prior to the empowered communities, how are they assimilated in? That's my first question. Second one is, I see here we have some examples of new initiatives. Are we going to take those as some exemplars to go out to local boards and to regional councillors even to say these are some of the things that can be done as sparks for activity? And the last question, probably the most difficult, would be the extra 400k in savings. Are we expecting that difference can be picked up in the actual deliverables to our community via those communities' empowerments themselves?
Through the chair, so to answer your first question, I think when the unit went live, we had a work program that had been developed prior, and so there was a mixture of delivery, just delivery because it needed to be done, and looking at where we could apply a more empowered communities approach. With the 16-17 work program, we've made an extensive effort to have that reflect an empowered communities approach. I don't think that we're 100% there, but I think we've made good progress. So that's my answer to that one. With the second question about the exemplars, yes, we are looking at a communication strategy that we can really highlight some of those, particularly some of the examples that cover, multiple local boards and things like that. So that's a piece of work in progress. And in terms of your last question, I think what we've got is quite a lot of legacy arrangements, and we need to look at all of those and look at how do we reflect an empowered communities approach. So how do we kind of be looking at the 5 key focus areas of the empowered communities approach and have that reflected in our regional funding.
Mr. Chair, just a very brief comment that this potential of the empowered communities approach is massive, and very early on in this term we worked with the Chief Executive Officer and the Chief Operating Officer to deliver things like the Waiku mudlarks who had been stalled down, and that's been a massive success. So with the right impetus and the right push, things can really move forward at great pace. So thank you for the work. Look forward to ongoing measurement of its success going forward.
Mr. McDonald.
Yes, I was just wanting to talk about homelessness, the projects that we've been sort of sticking funding into, whether it be the Auckland City Mission contract or the other housing contract. I guess what I'd be keen to see is, out of all of these things that we're doing, how many more people or how many homeless people are we housing? A couple of weeks ago I was watching this program, the Sunday program's Q&A, or what it was. They had a lovely panel of high flyers around how they could whip up prefab buildings overnight if they could just get rid of the bureaucratic red tape, that we had to free up some land, that we had to have iwi on board to drive this social housing stuff. And then they had in Skype Hudi Dennis from Te Puia Marae, and all he said was, last week we housed 62 people. So that's what I'm looking for, all this energy, effort, money, networking, plans, all going into the top end of the funding. How many more people are we, rough sleepers, homeless people are we housing out of this stuff?
Through the chair, so we are trying to work closely with providers and central government, because we see clearly that it's central government's responsibility to house homeless people, but obviously anything that we can do to support that space we want to do. I think Te Puia Marae is actually a great example of Empower Communities in action, because they saw a need and they responded to it. So we have, with our colleagues in Te Waka Angamua, worked closely to ease that for them, to try and make that as easy as possible for them in terms of across council as well, in terms of looking at permitting and any resource that they've needed. So we were able to assist them financially to help that process. So our focus hasn't really been on actually counting numbers, because that's not, our focus has been more supporting providers. We've worked closely with LifeWise in particular, and City Mission and Salvation Army around how can we assist them to increase their capacity to to actually do the doing.
So, but we would want some outcomes in these contracts, wouldn't we? How are they going?
I would have to come back to you on that. We don't yet have the first reports through, so the first funding round, some of those funding agreements haven't been going for that long. Some of them have been going for longer, so we don't actually have accountability reports back yet. But we are, working quite closely with them. So in terms of what we would have expected at this point, we are happy with the progress that's being made. I think we're more coming from the angle, for example, like we're supporting LifeWise to do some extensive work around looking at the Housing First model, because that's what the research shows is by far the most successful model. So, it's kind of a longer term thing. It's how do we support them to get the resources they need to be able to implement that model, because that's going to have the biggest difference long term. For example, we've supported Youthline to do a feasibility study to look at how they can support youth homelessness, because they've had some ideas, but they need to do a lot more work to get it to a point where it's going to be where government's going to look to fund it, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Thank you. And also we're doing those inspections, aren't we, of the boarding houses and accommodation through Mr. Barnes's team. So that must all help. Councillor Wayne Walker.
Sure. Got a couple of questions. The first one goes to the matter I raised when we looked to kick off this program, and that's around how we're able to capture the memory that you're developing, the obvious methodologies, contacts and so on, because what I'm mindful of is in this council we appear to go through ongoing restructures, and I've seen tremendous losses of staff across various areas, and I hope that your unit is able to stay, but I'm mindful that we really need to try and capture things as we proceed. So have you got some things in place to do that?
Through the chair, yes, again, I think that's work in progress, but through the work of our practice team, we would be, doing case studies. So, and through the evaluation, actually, we'll be looking at case studies as well. So, and building a practice framework, which will set out, the framework within which the Empower Communities approach operates.
Okay, and the other matter I want to raise as a question just goes to consistency, and it may be that Mr. Kimpton is better able to address it. And that goes to a background where across council, in Enviro schools, in Make a Difference, in Waikea, we're seeing massive cuts. I mean, half of the budget effectively cut, significant losses in offices. And these are in areas where we're trying to make a difference. These are all units that are empowering communities from early childhood in Enviro schools, through schools to teenagers, university students, and make a difference. And the circumstance where in communities where people want to take control of their berms, don't want to have sprays, want to do things that we see the exact difference, the exact opposite. We see disempowerment. So my question goes to consistency across council, and the things that I see happening on the ground, where
well, it's not, no,
sure, this is good.
Councillor, stop. I'd ask you for a question.
That is a question.
You're making a great
statement.
No.
My question is around consistency.
Okay, well, Mr. Kimpton's got the question. He'll answer it, and that'll be that.
We seek to provide consistency, and that's certainly at the heart of what we're always looking to do, and that includes the other activities that you've reminded us of, Councillor Walker. What I think the most appropriate thing to do is there has been some broad communications around changes within the Environmental Services Unit, and I'm happy to redistribute those so you understand what the nature of those changes are, so everybody's both reminded and clear on them. And I'll leave it at that. I think that's most appropriate.
Thank you.
I think, and it goes to a point
no,
we made.
We don't want your
This is a question. This is a question. It's a question.
Well,
and it goes to openness and transparency. And that is, fine, tell us, but let's tell the community at large what we're doing to Enviro schools, to Waikea, to Make a Difference, to all these areas where we're making cuts. Because they need to know. No,
you're
it's
out
a
of
question.
Order. You're out of order, Councillor. You're out of order. Please desist from those statements, which just really trifle with me and the chair, and it's really unbecoming of you, and it leads to disorder in the committee. So don't do it anymore. Thank you. With that, I intend to move the recommendation. I've added the bit on in relation to what Councillor Quack's raised, which is just to cover any points that have been raised with those documents. Is there a seconder for that, please?
Yep.
Councillor Brewer, do you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to seek some level of comfort because I sat at the Mission Bay Kohimarama AGM, residents AGM, earlier in the week, and Brett Young did a presentation to the community there about the role of the unit and the role of him as a strategic broker. And I suppose my question is, are the strategic brokers on a bit of an outreach program, given that this, this is well ensconced here as a resource for the community? I would hate to think that the strategic brokers may think sitting in a local board meeting at 9 o'clock at night when there's only half a dozen elected representatives and staff members was part of that strategic outreach, because I know that Residents Association got a lot out of what Brett was saying. So is that outreach program part of, certainly part of their job description, getting out there amongst the community Residents Association, because it's AGM season and this would be the great opportunity. That's the last one for the day, sorry.
Okay, that's fine. There was a nod, I saw a nod, so you got the answer. I've had it, it's been moved and it's been seconded by Councillor Casey. I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Aye. Against? Declare that carried. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Got a yes.
So we now move to item 14.
I think I'll do my questions in writing next time. A lot less stressful.
So
Let's
I'm
not
gonna
discuss the chairmanship.
move this. Councillor Casey?
I've got a question, just when is the age-friendly cities report coming back? August or September? As promised.
Off the top of mine, I do not know the answer, Councillor Casey. We will confirm.
Thank you.
Yeah, I've got a no up the back as well, so I can't. I'm not going to promise then under to deliver. So we will confirm the date.
Thank you. It's been moved.
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Casey. I'll put that. Those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declare that carried. We go to item 15. Matters for information. I'll move that. Seconded by Councillor Stewart. I'll put that motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declare that carried. We now move into public. Oh no, sorry. We've got Councillor Casey's extraordinary item of business. Councillor Casey, it's been moved and you've got the floor. There's no motions or anything comes out of this.
Councillors, you've received various memos from Grant regarding the pup that was found in Grey Lynn, deposited in a rubbish bin that then went to the shelter and has since been euthanised. And in the memo, Grant said, just one sentence, animal management staff who have been subjected to a considerable amount of online abuse. I want to talk to that both as a Facebook user, and I'm sure most of the councillors do dabble in Facebook in some way. I have never seen the level of abuse that I have witnessed in the last few days since the statement made by Jeff Keeper, who's only the acting manager of animal management. He personally has received death threats, which I've read and passed on to Grant, and just appalling. So that a video was posted so people would know what he looked like. His LinkedIn address was posted so that people would know how to contact him. And from that came statements like, so this is the murderer, heartless beep. Buckle up, mate, that's all I'm going to say. Or another one. This is the only one that didn't have a swear word in it. He needs to meet a cricket bat in a dark parking lot and he needs to know why. Or this one. You effing ballhead C. The only one who should have been put down is you effing idiot C. Watch yourself. You waste of space, hungry, worthless piece of... It wasn't just Jeff. As soon as the pup was said to be at the Henderson shelter, there was a publication of a telephone conversation between shelter staff who answered the phone and people who were inquiring after the pup. Alongside that came a whole raft of abusive comments about our shelter staff. Now, these are just people who were told by Dean not to make a comment, and that's what they did, no comment. So this conversation was published online, which I think was highly, highly unethical and probably illegal, and it was taken down eventually. But the comments about Jeff Keeper remain in place. Now, I want to talk about that because the issue is about our policy on euthanising pit bulls and pit bull crosses. Now, the policy isn't one that we consulted over. It's not part of our dog policy and it's not part of our bylaw. It's actually an operational policy of the council. Now, what I'd like to ask Dean is, given that 12,653 people signed a petition, and I signed it, I don't support the policy that we have. But given there's this amount of interest and level of emotion over the destruction of crosses, pit bulls and pit bull crosses, or breed specific, are we going to respond in some way with regard to it? And I ask that in all seriousness because the SPCA a few months ago changed their policy and they now rehome temperament-tested pit bulls and pit bull crosses. And as the advocate for the SPCA on council, I asked Animal Management at the time if we were reviewing our policy, and the answer came back, no. So I bring this to you because because of the Facebook page, it's got nearly 4,000 people who like it. There's been the petition, 12,500 over 3 days. So there's a seam there. You know, and the abuse and the threats, absolutely outrageous. But the response of council is what? So over to you, Dean.
Can I pick up on a few things? First of all, we recognise the passion, but there's passion across a broad spectrum. Those that are passionate about animal welfare and those that are passionate about people's safety. I also want to acknowledge that we have a zero tolerance on bullying behaviour. I think if we're in public open committee, I'm happy to reaffirm that. We have given Jeff and the staff every support. That includes in the workplace, and we make sure that he and his family feel safe as we would anybody else. And I would ask all councillors to be alert to bullying, whether it's of your peers or staff. It is not acceptable. And we know New Zealand is a significant issue. But congratulations to Grant and his team. They're doing the right things to make sure that our staff are safe. And we will do everything we can to ensure that. So that brings me to your last question, and that is how do we handle the passion on this particular issue? So my recommendation is we have a dog policy in place. It doesn't address this specific issue. It's an operational policy matter. We will be bringing back to this committee in August or September our annual operations report. I would expect us to address in that report some of the steps that I think we may wish to follow through with respect to our dog policy, and my recommendation that anything that's to be done there, in particular in this area, is done through Regulatory Bylaws Committee. So that's my proposed way forward. I think we need to tread very carefully through this one. When I look at the passion and the engagement around the amnesty, we recognise that there's two very strong sections of the community, and we're trying to balance those animal welfare and people safety expectations.
Thank you. Councillor Penrose.
Just to back up Councillor Casey, and thanks, Mr. Chair. And for those who come out to the Head Office of Animal Management for our audit and risk, all four councillors, as part of our health and safety as directors of Auckland Council, would have heard firsthand what our animal management team face on a daily basis. And I want to say, first of all, since we took this contract, we went away from contracting and brought this in-house in November 2014, our guys have led it absolute from the front. And they are passionate people, real passionate. And I'm not going to repeat it here, but if you'd been there, you would have heard what our guys get paid. And you'd be absolutely shocked when I see what elected members get paid and what these guys do for our job. 7 days a week, 24/7, wind, rain, hail and shine. Unbelievable. We ran that amnesty. 1,529 dogs was the final count. 1,529 menacing dogs. Touch wood, we haven't had a dog attack since our last one in Takanini. An ongoing cost to that little boy is $4 million plus. $250,000 to $260,000 to cost to the council for prosecution and taking no nonsense. I was out with the guys on Monday, and I couldn't get Tuesday, Wednesday because of committees. But I was in the Clendon, Weymouth and Mandaree area on Monday, and again it was people that ignored the amnesty, ignored it, and choose to obviously pay between $500 and $1,000 because they choose to ignore the amnesty. And the abuse that our guys get, it's just tenfold. It's just unbelievable. So the support that we need for those guys is the support what we're here for, to get them behind those guys and give them every bit of support they possibly can. And I even said to Jeff on Monday with News Hub, please release that transcripts of what our guys put up with on a daily basis. the threats, the stabbings. They want to stab the animal officers. Those guys are as passionate about animals as what we all are around this table. They are real passionate, but they've got a job to do. In this particular case with this pup, we have a process, we have a policy in place. The dog has to be in custody, well, in custody, but in care for 7 days to step through the process. The dog does not get destroyed. But this dog in itself was an unwell dog. The owner should have been held to account. And somebody out there knows who the owner is, not our animal management staff. So I'm going to leave it there, but we need to get them behind those guys who are doing an outstanding job on a daily basis, whether it's on the motorways, whether it's in paddocks, whether it's in the back streets of wherever, but we need to get them behind them, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Puapana.
Thank you, Chair. Just one question to Dean. Dean, in regards to the threats that have been outlined by Councillor Casey, I mean, they are disgusting. So are we taking it any further in regards to prosecution, tracking? Because, I mean, that's just one way of at least making the point to those that wish to end up doing what they want to do on Facebook or electronic media. So I'm hoping it is. But, yeah, just a question.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to add to what I said. We've referred the matter to the police. They've got records of everything on Facebook, and we referred the matter to Facebook, and we appeal to the moderator of that Facebook site to take the appropriate action.
Okay. Cool, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cashmore.
Just to back up what Councillor Penrose says, but also to congratulate Kathy, Councillor Casey, for bringing this to our attention. You know, what we saw down at Sharkey Street in Manukau in the animal shelter was shocking. And I would really encourage all the councillors to attend the next health and safety visit that we have. And you got an invite for it earlier this week, because this gives you an insight not only to what our staff do, but into our responsibilities as officers under the Act. And it is a really good and practical way for us to fulfil our roles. This puppy, is a terrible incident, but what we saw that our officers face daily down there was truly, it was eye-opening for me and somewhat shocking, and it's not acceptable. Facebook warriors, in this instance, aren't acceptable. The sort of intimidation and just basically bodily harm threats that our staff face, both men and ladies, is not acceptable. And we need to face up to that as a community as well. And we, as leaders of the community, need to lead that discussion. So thank you to Jeff and his team for the work they're doing on our behalf. They are really unsung heroes. And thank you, Kathy, for bringing it to our attention. I think it's something that's really important that we need to, as a community, face up to, that we do have an underbelly that is not pleasant.
Yeah. Councillor Stewart?
No, it's actually been said. It was mainly about following up about...
Okay. Well,
so, Mr. Chairman, just before, and it's not to do with the puppy issue, but I do think the bullying of staff that concerns me, and recently Councillor Watson, Walker and myself have been copied into well over 650 emails calling for Andrew Duncan to resign.
Which is absolute bullying.
That's what I'm trying to say.
I'm agreeing with you.
Order. You know, and from an organisation that I happen to know was using people that I know that had no idea that sort of thing was being sent out on their behalf. And I just think this council's got to push back on that. And it goes beyond just asking to resign. You know, we know where you live, sort of thing.
Can I, Mr. Chair, I just wonder on behalf of I know that this is raised as an issue and we can't pass recommendations, but I think it would be a very good thing for us to pass on in a more formal way our appreciation and our respect for the work of this part of our organisation. I cannot speak strongly enough for the work that our animal welfare team do. And in saying that, I just wonder if we could make a little distance between any review of our dog policy and this very unfortunate bullying incident, because I, for one, would not condone to be seen to be influenced in any way by an aggressive, vile and hate-filled campaign to actually make changes. So let's just have a little bit of space
Okay,
between
well,
the two. And
we'll-
can I, as
we'll get
part
a
of
letter.
our, just one final point, if we are about to have an agreement around this table of how vile this kind of process it is, can I ask all councillors to address the Facebook pages as well?
Some of them are dreadful.
They are.
Okay, so we'll
Just a question.
we'll do up a letter to send to animal control people.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Chair, just a question on the actual 16.1. I just wanted to sort of see if it was okay to put in the threats as well, because it is public record. The reason I'm saying that the matter of staff being bullied, because really the outrageous one is the threats that have been made, not only the bullied, but I just wanted to at least put it in there because it then becomes public record.
We'll say threatened and bullied.
Yeah, just whatever. Just wanted to sort of get that in, because that's exactly the crux of the issue that Kathy's raised.
Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, if I can also add, which will be coming up in the next number of months, because I've asked Mr. Kimpton to look into it, is to bring our noise control in-house. This is one that we get the most calls to service on and the most challenging, as you can imagine, when people are partying at 2, 3, 4 in the morning, and we have our armour guard guys or whoever, contract guys, go to those properties and they get physical abuse and intimidated. And this is another area, just highlighting the fact is it's going to come, and that we need to deal with it. And I would say that we need to deal with it in the way that we deal with animal management. We're doing a fantastic service there, but it's challenging. And noise control is challenging, but we need to deal with it better. And that if I have my way within the next 12 months, that will have noise control back in-house. But I'm just highlighting the fact is it's going to be challenging because it's along the same lines.
Thank you. Right, we've got a note there that we'll send a letter to the appropriate animal management staff on behalf of the committee. So with that item, I'll now move that we go into confidential, seconded by Councillor Cashmore. I'll put that motion. Those in